officially recording on my end. Now, let me see here. I believe even though we're in a webinar, I mean, I don't mind. Let me see if I can get you guys to be able to also record. If you'd like, you might as well be able to record. There's really no problem with that. Um, I'm just going to get everything set up. Yeah, I know it's late. I mean, we're basically everybody's all around the world here. So, all right. Well, don't know if I'm going to be able to. This is sort of in the webinar mode. Um, it's not a big deal if you can't record it because I'm going to record it and you're going to be able to download it. And my recording will be the highest quality on this end. So let's get going with that. We don't have to worry about it too much. Okay, 10 people. There we go. That's everybody. So I believe we might have, yeah, everybody's here. At least everybody I think is here. So we're going to get started. I'm going to begin with retrograde planets. It's a big topic. It's a little bit difficult when there's a large group, but as I said, this is kind of a, an advanced seminar. I wanted to pull this away from the free stuff. It's more long-winded. I wanted to be a smaller group so that we could really, you know, uh, zoom in on the information, and then later on you can ask me some questions directly about that. And it's all live, and it's not with 50 people asking different questions about different topic. It's more concentrated this way. So here we go. I've got something very simple to begin with, and I start my year, let's say, of trading. I like to think of it like I start my year in January 1st. I mean, it's just my personal year. That's usually when holidays are and you've got lots of time on your hands. And that's when I like to make my retrograde charts. I like to make a year or two in advance, and I throughout the year look at them, edit them, and get all into them. So the idea here that you're seeing up on the screen, I've got a Bitcoin chart up here, but we'll look at a bunch of different things today. What you're seeing here is a very basic script that Optima offers for free right away. This is why I'm showing it to you first, because they give you this script and they want you to try it out when you first purchase Optima. But this isn't something that requires Optima. It's just giving you basic cycle information. So basically each one of these horizontal lines here, the colorful lines, those are the planets that are represented by those colors. And then basically you've got the different periods of each planet's retrograde. And then we've got a line here, which if you just sort of, let's knock out the price just for now. This is just a line that counts the amounts of planets that are retrograde. So as the cycles happen, this line starts to go up, and every single time there's one more planet retrograde, it goes up one level, and you can see the levels, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's very simplistic. This is the beginning of it because it's so simplistic but so powerful. The retrograde period, which I like to call it, is this period when there's a cluster of retrograde planets that are occurring. And every season has it. So maybe you want to call it a retrograde season, but it shifts. Every planet happens at a different pace. So these things slowly shift over the years. All right. And sometimes they're much more congruent or all in sync, and sometimes they're much more apart. Mercury happens all the time. Venus and Mars are the slowest cycles, if you want to call it a cycle. It happens the least amount of times per year, every 2 years, in the case of Mars, every 2-ish years. And then you've got the bigger planets, and they happen more often, but the cycles are long. Now, these are important characteristics to remember, though they're just simplistic things. I'm just telling you some characteristics about retrograde periods. You might all already know this, but what we want to notice is this. The retrograde period is heavily dependent on the Earth's regular yearly cycle because it's a geocentric connection to the timing of the cycles. And so even though this is Jupiter retrograde or Saturn retrograde, these are happening once a year because once a year the Earth swings around and becomes aligned just right with Jupiter or Saturn or whatever planet, and you get a retrograde period, a period where the planet seems to move backwards in the sky. It's an optical illusion, but it's something that we can use for timing. But remember, it's not so different than using, say, just the sun to time things, because in some sense, the sun moves across the sky every year. And in one year, we also see the retrograde periods of the bigger planets happen. They're not exactly 1 year, they're irregular as well, but they're much more obviously dependent on the Earth's position. So this is an interesting thing because we end up with these ideas usually that Jupiter and Saturn and the longer term cycles are most important. But in the case of the retrograde periods, I like to call the most important planets the ones with the longest cycles. In a sense, just like you would deal with a weekly cycle or a daily cycle, the retrograde cycle is the longest cycle. So a monthly cycle is the longest cycle, and that would be the most dominant cycle over a weekly or a daily. And so when we're looking at this, the longest cycles are Venus and Mars, the green and the red, because they happen the least. And so that's just stuff to keep in mind. It's not that they're the most powerful in any kind of esoteric manner. I'm not trying to talk that way right now. It's just purely just the idea that they're a longer cycle. They happen least often, so it takes a long time for it to repeat or happen again, and therefore it's a powerful cycle. Now let's take a look at the price. I know you were looking at it before, probably wondering, wow, that really fits well. And it always fits well. It's just that kind of thing. It's gonna happen, not just because of some magic effect of timing or anything like that. It's not just because there's many planets that are retrograde here. Remember, this is just counting the amount of retrograde planets, and now I've laid a price over it. They're disconnected. The price is not being predicted. I could squeeze that line all I want, pull it down. It's just a timing line. It's telling me when there is that many planets retrograde. And as I stretch it out, I get more detail. And the idea here is I want to see it against the structure of the price. This is my way of dealing with it. You know, I like to see this long-term line that's going to define the wave of the year. But you're going to find you go back immediately. It's not going to work like this well every time. This was sort of a fluke. It works well. It shouldn't work this well every time, I'd say. But it's happening because of a certain effect that we're going to talk about today. And it's about the way that planets call the price. Previous cycles calling the price for us in the next cycle. And so you see these big swings in relationship to the retrograde periods because there are lots of new price time calls being made by the planets in these areas, we'll call them. It's a weird way of putting it, but basically the idea is that there's lots of energy here because there's lots of places for the price to bounce around. There's lots of calls being made, lots of ways that the price should be moving in relationship to price targets that we have in relationship to these planets. And so, as you can see in 2018 in the Bitcoin chart here, and 2017, you had a total disconnect from that up down. So that's why I'm gonna just want to prove to you that there is, it's not about that particular connection, but it still is working in some manner. You can just sort of pull the price around, open it up. You're getting turn dates. If you were to look at the hard dates, the beginnings and the endings, you're getting the midpoints with this point here. It's a nice way of seeing that relationship of the full cycle playing out. It's only one planet, two planets being retrograde. And so you realize that it's not about the full price structure being defined by the retrograde planets, but it's also, you know, about the swing timing. It's a good timer when we see that kind of connection to a moment where, especially the tip being a good defining moment. And so that becomes, you know, midpoints of these cycles become important. And we're going to look at all that and how to use that information for trading. But this is just a good way of showing you the effect is clear. The retrograde cycles are telling the price where to go in some manner. But we got to suss it out. We have to break it apart. Let's just take another look at another stock. I've got here Clorox. It's been moving a lot recently. And, you know, it's not as close as we would have liked, like the Bitcoin chart looked at first, but let's just take a look. We've got some nice turn dates here. We've got a good kind of building in towards this shape here. You know, the cycles are starting to become prominent here, and the price is being pulled up towards those price targets. Again, I'm going to show you how to get those price targets, but I just want to show you again, if I were to kind of get in there, sometimes the markets fluctuate a lot, volatility shifts. So we've got to make sure that we see every single detail, but also we've got to realize that, you know, at this time, the market was moving much differently than it was recently. But still the shift, the changes in trend, the overall kind of shape of things is being defined by the timing of these, and not just the timing, but realize when we see it with this sort of sine wave, we're getting the midpoints shown to us very clearly, and that's something very significant. It's something, it helped me really define this technique for myself, because I always knew, or when I came into using Optima or other Astro software, the idea was clear to me how to use retrograde planets. But how do you suss out all the details? It's quite complex. It's not so easy, and that's why having something like this helps. But realize that if you just had a pencil and a paper, or you printed out your chart and you had your pen, you could easily mark off, or on another piece of software, if you didn't have this, you could easily mark off the dates. You could find these dates online. It's very basic information. All that stuff is out there for you. And you can plot when things begin and end, and then you can connect the dots. You can create a plot that, you know, works this way, where the midpoints become important, where, you know, when you have one retrograde planet shown here, you know, it jumps up in level. At the midpoint, it comes back down. So it's a particular way of charting it, but using a piece of software makes it very easy. And I'll show you how to use this script. I can share the file with you if you use Optima. And realistically, it's all out there for you. Optima has this just on their regular page. It's a great little script, but it really is powerful. It shows you this shape that gets defined all the time. Let's look at USO here. I've got, oh, I thought I had that one there. Let's just go here. I've got a script here set up. Retrograde. It's really easy to plot down. Might take a second or two to load up. You see how it comes out at first, and then let's get our, so just a sort of default script, and I will just take this analysis cluster result. That's my sine wave there. I'll just throw it over the price, but I'll add a layer so that it's separate, and then I'll throw it over the price, and then I'll disconnect the two layers so they're not connected. And this is great little information if you use Optima. We'll make it a little more clear. And now we've got the price, and I can set this layer to its separate scale on the left. And now I can manipulate both of these instruments separately. And, you know, again, it's oil. You want to be trading oil? Well, I would be looking at this chart. There's no question, you know. The Mercury retrograde that occurred in 2020, this year, was one of the most powerful events astrologically I've ever seen happen. I was anticipating, and there were many other things going on. It's not the reason why these things occurred, but the timing was so amazing, and the way that the different instruments all pick up on the timing, and also the price levels that you'll see are predicted. But again, very simplistic, just looking over the amount of planets. You could also do something like this, where you create a clone layer of the results, and then you flip them so that you're just seeing that opposite movement. Where's my, sorry. One of these layers is going to be inverted. There we go. Almost looks like a sound wave now, right? If you've ever studied audio. And let's get our scale here. There we go. Oh, no, that's not the right one. Left scale. Now, if you're, you know, wondering, I'm fiddling around with the software, that kind of stuff. So there we go. It's just a way of seeing the turns and the way that the planetary lines, or sorry, the planetary cycles are really affecting things in a timing sense. It's not about exact measurement at this point. We'll get into that. The planets were same point when oil inverted. Um, Not exactly sure. Let's not exactly sure what you mean by that. So it's a little bit tough to, you can notice there that as we're approaching, here we have Pluto retrograde coming in on April 28th. The bottom, the low, where it went below zero in futures, blah, 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 all that crazy stuff. April 17th, here we have the Pluto retrograde beginning. Um, Saturday, April 25th. So, there's a few days, but again, we're pulling it up here. Yeah, gold is a very clear example. Everything, I'm telling you that everything is a clear example. Bitcoin is a clear example. Every single cryptocurrency, Clorox, the minerals that have all been going crazy this year in all the healthcare industries, anything you would like. I'm trying to show you, I'm going to spin through many markets, and yeah, bring up some markets if you'd like, throw them down there in the chat. But realize that I'm trying to show you something here. It's not about whether it works great in one or another. It's definitely that it works everywhere. And that's why we would use it. Now, I might not trade certain kinds of stocks, and maybe, if you trade different kinds of index stocks, volatility index, I don't know what people trade these days. It's just crazy. But basically you want to see an actual moving stock that you can make sense of volume, and you can make sense of shares or amount of volume on the market with bids and asks. This kind of information should be pretty clear and simple. And the market that you could be trading with this kind of stuff is generally the stock markets, the currency markets, the gold markets, the forex markets, the cryptos, anything you'd like. It really does work with anything except for stuff that's hyper specialized. And if you trade options, you're going to have to be able to convert this information for yourself onto options markets. Okay, but generally, yeah, it's going to work literally on everything. It worked great on gold this year for sure too. I'll show a little example when we get into the price predictions. But this is just extremely simplistic stuff. I didn't do anything more than give you here a script that is almost like a default script from Optima, and I'll share the link on how you can make that. But it's just about the period and how many planets are here, and how many planets are retrograde here. So I'm going to try to get through a bunch of stuff. Then I'll ask for some questions and see if everything's clear, and then we'll move on again. And yeah, I'll switch between instruments. No worries about that. But I just wanted to show you that I use the retrograde periods as a way to begin my year because it's such a powerful swing tool. It's telling you where the market is going generally. It's giving you major targets and major timing. And when I get down to it with the price prediction, you're going to see that this really can define the year for you. And so if I bring up something else, let's bring up gold. BLD. Go. And the way I begin always is with planetary lines. Now, planetary lines, I'm gonna have to give a little example. I've talked about them probably ad nauseum, but basically, planetary lines, they are just an image of the planet drawn onto the price. How are we doing that? We're doing it at a ratio by planetary degree. Geocentric, heliocentric, however you want to view that. In this case, I'm going to use $1 per degree. I'm going to be very simplistic today when we deal with this kind of stuff. You're going to see. You might be wondering why some people like to keep this kind of information, well, whatever, hidden or anything like that, secret. It's not about being secret. It's just that the most simple thing, the most simple idea is commonly the actual answer. So I could tell you to use $1 a day. And yeah, it's not going to always work at that ratio. But when the market's moving, it might be actually $1 a day, or maybe it's going to be $0.5 a day, as in 50 cents a day. But if you don't know Gann yet, or these things might seem weird to you. Again, this is sort of, I'm talking, hopefully this is a bit of a simple idea for you to conceive or to picture in your mind here. I'm going to get a degree line up here as well. I've got my price degree intervals. And this price degree interval tool just is going to throw down the degrees of the ephemeris or the circle onto the price at a set ratio. I've explained this a few times in different webinars. So if you don't understand this yet, get used to seeing these lines, but also remember, you could ask me questions later and also review my free webinars where I explain some of this stuff. Now I think that you're realizing why I began with the other stuff that I did in those free webinars. So I'll just make them, let's just see the 0 degree line or the 360 degree line. And I'm going to set it again. We got to set it to that $1 per degree. And now we're getting our 360 line. It's also 0 degrees. And we are, if I pull up an ephemeris, just to be very specific about this for somebody who might not be clear yet, basically, we are seeing the positions of the planets from the viewpoint of Earth going around the sky, and as the dates move, the planets move at their own rate across the sky. They all move up and forward in the sense that they all change longitude by going upwards. Now, it's a virtual image of the sky. It's not the real view of the sky. It's sort of this converted view of the sky. It's basically just taking the actual position of Jupiter. So if I were to double click on the chart here, it'll bring me right to the date that I've clicked on. And I can see that Jupiter is interacting with my 360 line here. So I'll just prove to you here, maybe even on this date when it leaves, you can see that Jupiter here is at the 0 degree line. You can see that Jupiter is at about 0 degrees that day. And then as I go forward in time, I can look here. Oh, now Jupiter is at about 90 degrees. And I can draw those lines on here as well. 90. You can see Jupiter's at 90 degrees there. So it's very simplistic. Let's draw the planets, and then we'll draw the planets and get them onto the price. That's what we're doing. It's very simplistic. Hopefully that makes sense because I'm going to be using this a lot today. It's very powerful. It's exactly what you're using an ephemeris for when you're practicing classical astrology. But this is the conversion that we're going to be using, and it's going to become very clear, hopefully, to you because we're going to use every element that we can. But let me look through here. Some questions. In the left axis is the result from the planets, the sum of different weights of the planets. You're talking probably about this here. No, this is not a sum of a weighting of any kind of planet. Everything is completely weighted equally. It's just counting how many planets there are actually retrograde. But let's move on from this. This is just a nice thing that we can use to see the structure, see the relationship. I would not use this to trade. This is just the starting point. So the most basic point that we could begin with is that the structure of the market is defined by what you see here, the planetary cycles. And let me remove one of those because it gets a little confusing. But yeah, you can see the structure is defined by it. And I'm going to show you how to use that. Okay. So these, again, no special weighting to each planet, no deciding one planet is more important than another. This is just counting how many planets are retrograde. Setting it to the left scale, and I can manipulate it. You can see is this 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. At the most, you're getting, let's see here. Maybe I've got a little bit of the way that it rounds out the cycles. The cluster analysis tool, okay. Cluster scripts. The weighting is set, everything is set to 5. So it's counting things, smoothing things out for me with the sine wave. Again, I'm just looking for that connection to the structure. You can also add the retrograde node, but the node you see adds a lot of noise, but that's great for some intraday trading. Okay. But again, I'm looking for something more basic when I look at this, just a beginning, just a starting point. Wow, look at that. That's how kind of it's a great kind of indicator to you that this is something you can use. And so going to gold or oil, whatever you'd like, the first step is always to jump right into getting those planets right on the price. Because the concept is this, it's going to help us figure out where the planet was previously and where the price should be in the future. And that's exactly the kind of thing that we need to know. We're not going to be looking at an ephemeris. I wouldn't really do this. I would learn, even if I was doing this manually, in the simplest way. I would learn to draw what you're seeing here on a chart, however you can, whether it's with a pencil and paper. I mean, on a daily or a weekly or a monthly, that would be valuable information. A chart would last for years, so you'd only have to work on it by hand for a day or two, probably max. And so this is just about working out these different cycles and how to use them. So I'm going to pop right in here. I hope this is not jumping too quickly for everybody, but I know for some people it's even a little review. So let's move on. And remember, you could always ask me questions at the end and also over email afterwards, etc. I'm going to close the ephemeris because I think other than just maybe showing you really quickly something interesting you can do with the ephemeris, I can take this tool here and I can add, if I add a color coding, it's now going to, when I place my date, I double click on the chart, it places the date of the ephemeris to the point I've double clicked on. And now you can see it's defining that day with a yellow line because that yellow line has been chosen by there. And as I move it here, I can see the planets move, and that's really interesting because if I were to isolate just Jupiter and just see Jupiter on there, Jupiter's down here now. Okay, I'll put my in Sagittarius. So if I start moving it around, I could see the actual retrograde cycle occur. I can see it hit almost 270 degrees, and now look, it's going to start moving backwards. And that's literally what you're seeing here. The degrees are dropping. It's moving backwards on the circle. And now, as it gets down to the bottom of its, or the end of its retrograde cycle, it starts to go back upwards. Okay. Pull that up and you can see it just continues down. So if you look at that from the beginning again, it goes, stops, goes backwards, stops, goes forwards. That's a full retrograde cycle. Hope that was clear. If there's any delay, remember that the video at the end is going to be super clear and 1080p. So let's take a look at the chart now. So all I wanted to prove to you is that the retrograde cycle happens a particular way, and we've now taken those planetary lines are just the degree of the planet, the actual position drawn onto the chart. We've taken those, we've drawn Jupiter onto the chart, and now I'm going to get rid of the ephemeris. I'm going to look at the price and the idea of the retrograde planets. This is how we use them. We are going to pull up our retrograde tool here. You can do this again using that other chart if you'd like, but I can also visualize retrograde periods this way, a retrograde planet or planetary retrograde tool. And let's set this to Jupiter. You can see that whole period. I can drag it down, probably in the option to extend it. And you can see it's just giving me the period defined by the blue marker. That's the actual period of Jupiter that when it's retrograde. And then the gray period is something called the shadow. And that's a very particular period when it comes to retrograde cycles. It's not part of the retrograde cycle. The planet has already gone direct, as in it's already started moving forward again. But the shadow means basically this. When the shadow ends, that's the point in time, in this case, when Jupiter reaches the point. I'm trying to get that point there. There we go. Hopefully that's clear on your end. That point right there, that's when Jupiter has returned to the exact same point that it was when the retrograde period began. And so that's when, if Jupiter was at a particular degree at the beginning of the retrograde cycle, that's the date that it is now finally. Once it's gone backwards, now turned around and gone forward again. That's where it was the day that it actually got back to its position at the beginning, and then it's been able to move on from there. And that's the shadow. And you can see the shadow is also a major turning point on the markets. I think that immediately you're seeing, not just are we seeing Remember those periods of retrograde that we were seeing in clumps, but also just the single retrograde cycle of, say, Jupiter is a powerful one, even for gold. You know, it's good for everything. Which planet do you use for what? Well, you use each planet for everything. Every single planet for everything. Seems daunting, but it's not, because again, I'm doing this at the beginning of the year. I'm spending a couple days working out my retrograde cycles if I want, even a day or two. I'm pretty fast at it now, especially with Optima. And this is what I'm doing. Let's say here, this is 2015, the beginning of 2015. Well, we've got a retrograde period right at the beginning. Perfect. So I'm ignoring the price action from this period, but I am understanding that I'm going to start projecting from this price range. I've got my price range of 360 degrees of price. You can see that right there, 360 to 360. Hopefully that makes sense. That's just that set. Remember, it's all set to $1 per degree right now. So the wheel is on the screen, it's drawn. And then also the planetary line of Jupiter is just mapping that position of Jupiter, moving up the wheel of 360. If we zoom out, you can see the full cycle. Starting here and going up and ending sometime in the future soon. Let's get a few more bars into the future here, blank bars. I'll put 1,000. Be careful when you're using Optima if you are. Try not to load too much stuff. You might crash your computer depending on the power of your computer, unless it's super powerful. You could literally, you know, if you load hundreds of months into the future or thousands of months into the future, you might crash your computer by loading too many planetary lines, etc. So I know that we want to just jump right in, but let's move back a little bit. Let's just see what's been going on. Obviously, planetary lines, they provide some sort of idea that you can, you know, look at, like support and resistance. You know, it's not true support and resistance. They're not going to work as great as geometric ones and using highs and lows, things like that. But they are a magnet. Let's call that planetary position a very good magnet. And we should look for periods when there is something going on with that planet, like say the retrograde cycle. We should look for those planetary lines to become somewhat activated. As you can see, that's kind of happening here. Just arbitrarily, the price is moving towards Jupiter during those retrograde periods. It's basically on them. And there's lots of ways to use that. I know it seems I'm zooming around here for years, but remember, if this was 1 year, this is, say here I've got 2018, I'd be looking towards the price being around the planetary line, let's say, you know, in a couple months from January. And so if I know where the price is at that point, I've got a good idea of the target, and I might be shorting into that time. You know, you've got that idea. There's going to be many other things to consider. There's going to be other planetary cycles, other retrograde cycles to consider. But this one's a good one to start with. You notice a lot of the time, I'll begin with Jupiter. Jupiter's just one of those planets. It's got, you know, everything going for it. It's got a good swing time, and it moves fast enough, but also slow enough. You'll see what I mean. So basically, what I'm going to do, take my horizontal line tool, and I'm going to start projecting the date. Let's say I was back here in 2016. Well, I've only got really one projection to make for Jupiter for the whole year. I'm going to go from here, and I'm going to draw forward, and I'm going to look for the price to be at this line sometime within the next retrograde cycle. Now, I mean, it did work great even in the actual retrograde cycle it was in, but I would see that more like a connection to something that happened in the past, like this planetary cycle. Let me see, let me get that a little more aligned. And remember, we've also got a different price range there that we could look at. We've also got the date of the direct, and we might want to project that forward as well. I can just copy my lines, paste them down, place them. So you're thinking about it, why were those big sine waves that were showing us the groupings of cycles playing out? Why were the prices looking so perfect with them? Why was the price moving so well with those swings that were defined by the amount of cycles occurring? Well, if we were looking at the prices here in, say, 2015, and then we know when all the cycles are occurring in 2016, we know where the price was before we get there, well, we have a good idea of where the price is going to swing towards. We've got our range of 360 degrees. So if we do see a new range being broken into, well, we've got another line there to deal with. And yes, I mean, in some way, when you're dealing with Jupiter retrograde and you're here and it's breaking down below the 360-degree line, you've got a lot to think about and you've got a lot of other things to observe. Maybe I'm looking at transit cycles. Maybe I'm just looking at geometry, counting bars, things like this, your regular stuff. But once this is defined, you've got a clear price range for yourself. You've got the planetary line that exists up here at about 180 degrees. And then you've got your call from the previous time. And I'm going to tell you there's multiple ways to look at this. It's not just a $1 per degree relationship going on. There's multiple relationships of planetary movements at different ratios. And so as I go along, let's take a look. Let's see how perfect this works out. The ideal is this: $1 per day, or sorry, $1 per degree, or say $10 per degree, or maybe 10 cents per degree, depending on the price range. We'll go through a bunch of different examples. But I would start with my 1-to-1, my $1 per degree, let's say. And then I want to just the day of actual retrograde, the day of the next retrograde cycle, I would prefer the way that this should all work, the best way. If it's working really well, it should be right there on that very day. Now, it's not working out in this point. It's working out at a different level. And there's different reasons for that. There's multiple cycles going on. So the cycles can get behind, and Dan would probably say something like, the market here is behind time. There was a call here for a price to be at a certain place. The price was very much below that price. And therefore, the call is much higher and the price, it needs to get there. And I mean, that's an amazing run to get in on, and to even get in on it once it breaks out, and to know that you've got targets up here. Well, that's super powerful. And as I go on, let's look at the next year. Well, the next year, let's look right in there. Oh, well, I mean, that almost worked perfectly, coming out and giving us that price on the date of the direct, that degree projecting forward, giving us almost exactly the price, maybe 1 or 2 days later. If we zoom right in, you can even see that the price closed on the high there, right at that level. Okay. Stuff is pretty powerful sometimes, especially when it comes down to those moments. That's why people are waiting for the day of retrograde to occur, because you're looking for this moment to occur. Not only was I looking for this movement upwards to be sort of confirmed along the way, but I've already got a target that day. And so if I keep going, let's move it again. Let's move it forward. Let's go here. Now this time, I have to go a little further to get that working out. Now, I know that you're seeing it already. This level is important the whole way through, all the way through the years. This level is becoming important. Even if I projected the previous retrograde period and I took it even further forward, you can see that those levels, they're still important. So I would keep an eye on those levels. I wouldn't just end them there. But what I'm looking for is that magnetism to this area during this period of time, this price range. And then there's a couple different ways to deal with even this data. Again, I'm looking for the price to be at this exact price on the day of our shadow. And we can see 2 times the price jetting down to this level. There's different kinds of effects, but you're going to see them. It's not for me to define them all. They're sort of all related to these particular things: the timing of the actual event and the price level being called. And is the price at that level? Well, if not, well, where is it? And how far away is it? And how much money can we make if we were to sort of make a trade that gets us there? Once we know the price is on its way, well, Is it worth getting in? Well, I mean, in this case, of course it was. And if you want a little more detail, you can always, let's get right in here. Let's see, there was a bunch of swings in here. It's going to be easier to see the effect, but it does work all the time. So in this retrograde period, there's many swings, and I would be assuming that there was probably, I mean, there's usually many retrograde planets on top of each other. But let's take a look here. I've got a simple time retracement tool here set up for myself. You'll see it when I pull it out. It's just the regular old time retracement tool. And I'll move those percentages out of the way. Let's get them a little smaller. So those are just your standard Fibonacci style 25%, oh, not Fibonacci, not 50%, but you've got your 38.2, you've got your golden ratio. And I'm just looking at the turn dates relating to these periods of time within the retrograde period. You're seeing the turn dates are really strong. And again, I'm looking for that magnetism. I'm looking for these periods to be attracted to those levels from our previous retrograde cycle. So if this is the level that was called previously, well, I'm looking here now, and I've got some pretty good work, like the 50% came right to that level there. The 25%, it was underneath, so it moved upwards toward those lines. When did it get there? Well, it got there right at the 38.2. And then we've got a good turn here relating to the top of the 61.8, moving downwards, but we were at the actual planetary line, and it moved downward from there. Let me just knock out this background. It does flash back and forth. When I select it, it wants you to see that you're selecting it. I'm just going to knock that out because we've got the period defined to ourselves already. And now you can see a little more clearly how you would use that to trade. I mean, that's, again, nothing more than knowing within a large range of price from 0 degrees, which is at 1080, to the 360, which is at 1440. This entire period of time that gold is moving in the entire 2000s, from 2000, say, what was that, 2013, this range of 360 is basically dominating, and it's not exiting. So any call is pretty clear to you the whole time. It's not calling for prices up here yet, but we'll look at this stuff that happened recently. Okay, but I just want to prove to you, I'm going to say that a lot, and I want to prove it to you. In a sense, you're here for me to teach you something, but often I am trying to prove things to people. We're just about this simplistic technique and how powerful it is. Projecting our retrograde period forward to the next time, and look at that. Now, if I told you that I wasn't going to look at gold for this particular thing, and I haven't really been paying attention to gold lately just because it's not on my radar right now, I didn't really know it was going to work out this well, but it does. I know it will because it always does. Even if I go up here and I look to the recent highs, it did jump over the 360 degrees, and we'll talk about that. But if I pull my horizontal line over from this line up here, I think you're already seeing it, the price is there. And this is no joking around, guys. This is like something that you can go back 300 years or 200 years on whatever stock you'd like, whatever index you'd like. It's going to work perfectly, and it's still working perfectly, quite obviously. There's things to consider. Volume, how fast the market's moving. Are we going to break through the 0 degree line? If we do, well, which target is coming? Is it going to be the one, is it going to be the planetary line, or is it going to be the actual call from the previous time? These things all kind of happen all together. You've got to suss it out as it's coming. But if you're swinging, trading long-term swings here, I mean, not only was there already a call for this level up here at this point, so if you were down here and you were long and you were already waiting for this period to come for this level of about 270 degrees in here, and if you held on long enough, let's see our time retracement against this period, and let's take a look without our period defined. Remember, it's a rough. It's not about an exact day necessarily, but we do want to see the price at the place we want on that day. So you're still seeing some major moves defined by the timing here. Movement at the 38.2. This level defined by the previous cycle over here. And if you're long here, well, you're already long here. And yeah, I might be worried about taking some profits as it breaks over the Jupiter line, taking some profits as we get towards our 360 line, and maybe re-adding as we break above. It's really a nice. It is like support and resistance at that point, and you've got to kind of have a trading system involved here. But it's really giving you absolute targets throughout the year. And this is only one planet, guys. Remember that there's multiple planets. So if you want to be trading back and forth every day, you want to try to avoid things like this messing up your actual trade. Well, you've got to employ your trading system on top of this. You've got to employ some sort of stop system. You might have other smaller cycles that you're paying attention to, like the natal transits that I've shown in other webinars. Some people might have taken classes with me and they know the planetary aspects, sure. And again, we're going to get into the Wheel of 24 later, and that's going to help you define these in-between moments down to a 1-minute chart if you really wanted to, but we won't get that tight today, I don't think. So it's really going to blend all this stuff together for you. So let's take a look. So if we want to look into the future, we would just pull our horizontal line and move it there. If I told you that in July of 2021, I would anticipate a price level of these levels to come about, it's possible. But you realize that it's not something that you would make that kind of prediction with. You wouldn't make it hard in stone. You wouldn't say, oh, the market's going to be there that day and then bet your life on it. No. This is something that you use as a general tool for prediction, because you realize that there is also this level here that could technically work out if this was something that was projecting in this level of 360 and the market then fell well below. Well, our next call is down here, and it's far down enough that, well, it's a completely different market if the market goes there than if it goes there. And so there's different things in the middle that we need to be paying attention to, other cycles. But this, when we are getting towards the Jupiter cycle and it's coming up our Jupiter retrograde cycle, then we start paying attention to it. Even as the movement towards the time begins, as this trend, wherever it began or over here, we're definitely already aware of the next target, and we're paying attention to it. We're watching for Jupiter to go retrograde, but also the price to cross certain levels. So it's a bit of a balancing act here, but I am looking for movements associated to specific times, and I am looking for the price to be at those specific things. If you aren't using a Gann fan yet, well, you should be using a Gann fan. A Gann fan is just, use it. I mean, these are Gann charts. These aren't Gann chart. These are Gann charts, and realize that Gann. What Gann chart have you ever seen where there wasn't a Gann fan? You've got to use these things together. A little bit of putting these processes together really defines a lot for you. Let's start right at the bottom. I know that's not really appropriate. Some people like say, oh, well, you need to use the double bottom. Let's just put it right at the bottom. And I'm going to put it into the future. It goes forever. And I'm just going to set it just like the planets, $1. That's $1 per daily bar. A great tool for you to use. It's giving you the strength of the market. That's your Gann 1 by 1. And you're getting those extra details from the planets. You're getting your triangles like you do with your supports and resistance, but they're there forever. And these planetary lines aren't related to price at all, other than the range that you're sitting in. And so you're getting good movements in relation to the geometric 1 by 1. It's nothing fancy going on there at all. That's the absolute bottom of the market. And then we're moving from there at $1 per bar. Really simplistic. Maybe you want to see it against calendar days because you prefer that. Well, it's going to work too. Different, right? Giving you the tops. That's a common one, obviously, because calendar days, they move faster than counting bars, in the sense that there's more calendar days per week than there is daily bars, because there's weekends. You don't have to worry about this with crypto, but on regular markets, I would definitely use those things together. I mean, if you had this information, even just removing these symbols and these planetary lines, let's say you had clients and you wanted to show them a neat chart and you don't want them to see, I don't know why everybody has a trouble with astrology and showing people that, but it does make sense. I suppose a lot of people don't like to show this stuff to people. Well, you could remove your planetary lines and you just got your geometry. And well, I mean, that's a great chart to show people right away. You could even remove your degrees, but I mean, planetary or regular degrees are pretty normal. And so, these are really powerful. I mean, you could use this so many different ways. Let's do a couple more examples. Let's move to a different market and let's do a different ratio altogether. So let's do, well, nobody came up with, I mean, I'll do one crypto and then I'll do one other stock, and we did one Forex. That makes sense. This works with equity, any equities. Let's do Netflix. Do you guys like Netflix? NFLX. All right. Really simple again. I'm just going to get my again planetary lines down. I'm not going to do Jupiter this time. Let's do something different. Let's look at Mercury, right? If I'm showing you something that's happening once or twice once every year or a year and a bit, like Jupiter, well, Mercury happens more often. Let's take a look at these lines here. I'll set them to, in this case, well, I guess Netflix isn't in a different enough. Oh, well, I guess it is let's do $1. Actually, we're probably going to use 10 cents for Netflix because it's below $360. Okay, it's a good way to gauge it. There's different ways to figure that out. We're not getting the huge swings this way at 10 cents. So there's different, when you start to deal with these faster cycles and more lines and more swings, basically you're going to realize that the market moves constantly at different speeds. At this major high, it's moving at a different speed than it was when it was moving even here, where it's sort of topping out and moving sort of sideways for many months. So if we were to just look at something basic, I've done this in other webinars, just taking an average speed of the market, using my GAN my GAN dynamic fan. I can just use this as a ruler. It's not necessarily a tool for trading, really. It's also just a ruler in Optima. I'll put it from the bottom to the top. And I could see that at the most, the market was at fastest moving $1.78 per daily bar in this case. But you can see that that's the fastest, most steep move. So we also like to round things out. Some people might say, well, that's the ratio of the market moving forward. In some sense, yes, it is this exact number. You might want to work with it a little bit and try to use some math and use your fans to set to that amount. But we could also use some things that are set to geometrically perfect ratios, like $1, $2, 10 cents, 20 cents, 50 cents, because it's almost like the idea of a Platonic solid. I don't know if that makes any sense to some of you, but basically the idea is that there's these perfect geometric structures that are out there already. They show us natural forms of support and resistance on the markets when we draw them over. It's a simplistic idea. It happens for probably much more complex reasons, but we don't need to get too deeply into that. What we need to know is that the market fluctuates in speed. And if I were to take this tool here, my Mercury tool, and I can actually set it to being set to use the chart's unit price. And I'm going to click on there. And then I'm going to use this tool here, this dynamic GAN fan, and I'm going to apply the price to the chart. So basically, any unit rate that I set this price to, or sorry, this fan to, where it moves at a certain rate and finds these different prices, it's going to now apply it to my GAN planetary line. So if I move the fan, the lines move. Let's do that. So my lines have moved. And let's move our 1 by 1 of our fan. You can see my planetary lines are going to start to shift. Now the computer has trouble doing this very smoothly. It's a complex kind of thing. But as I go less steep, you can see the planetary lines become more condensed. And as it finally gets more, there we go, a little more horizontal, you know, it's all matched up a little better. And, you know, that's now back down to that 0.1, like we said, 10 cents a day. And now our planetary lines are also, set those to 0.1. You just realize that if I go too high, then my planetary lines become too wide to use. But it has to be in relationship to the market. And the market fluctuates. So I kind of need to be prepared for multiple possibilities. Yes, there's ways to possibly predict ratio, when the market's going to be hottest, coldest, that kind of thing. But also, we can just prepare for the worst or the best. If the market's going to be moving very slowly, we can use smaller ratios. We can get right in here and zoom right in. I can use multiple layers of 360 here. Let's get our price degree interval tool, sorry. I've got a 0 degree line here. There we go. There we go. That's better. And I'll set that to my 10 cents again. Let's get rid of that fan. Oops. And I think you're seeing immediately that if I were to look at just Mercury and try to see its swings, and now let's get our retrograde cycle tool up there, planetary retrograde. Remember, it's Mercury. That's the default option, obviously, the first one that everybody thinks about. And we're looking for the price to be at levels previously called. But look at how chaotic the market is. Even at 10 cents, it might be moving a little bit too fast for this. But let's prepare and let's see how it works out. If we were here in November and we saw some price movements, we might use this level here. Yep, those worked out. But I know that I also had this worked out down here. And if I was seeing the price plummeting downward, this would be a target for me. And obviously the market didn't plummet down, and those targets worked out literally to the day, to the time. And if I look at that, nice little cycle within the cycle there, my simple Fibonacci retracements, just like you saw the midpoint being important before, it's a little hard to see any details here. You might have to look at this on a 4-hour chart. Let me clear that up for you a little bit. But you could see that the biggest movement's happening in the middle of the channel. But sticking to the planetary line and the numbers that were called previously, especially even right at the end there, kicking in again. It's extremely predictable, happens all the time, but you've got to kind of manage this idea that there's multiple ratios going on. So, it might get a little bit unclear. What if there was 4 other planets retrograde here and they were all kind of beginning all at the same time? Yeah, it becomes a bit of a problem for you. And the other thing is that a lot of people associate retrograde cycles with a big drop in price. And well, in this case, it didn't happen. In some case, it actually, or in some way, it actually went up. It did drop a little bit, that initial fake out, if you want to call it that. But then the market went back up and it exceeded any level. So, did it right on the 618, biggest candle coming in on the 618 of the channel. Let's see, a little bit hard to get exact to the cycle here because it's on a daily. Okay, but I think you're seeing that significant power. But let's take another look here. Let's see, there's a lot of stuff going on, a lot of movements. There's our drop in price in a retrograde cycle. And I would suggest the idea is this, that as you're approaching this cycle, or at the beginning of the year, like I said, it's best, you would just prepare multiple layers of different predictions. So I would create here in Optima, I have this ability to layer things, and I can group things and layer them, name them. So here I've got Mercury retrograde at 10 cents per degree. Okay, and let's go up to our current action, and let's project a little bit. Let's move forward. We've got our Mercury retrograde incoming here. High low, right? So that's a good price range for us to be predicting soon incoming, and it makes a lot of sense with the position of the current market. But if the market were to fluctuate heavily here, like it has in the last while, where we're jumping levels of 360 degrees even, this happens because the market fluctuated so much that the ratio changed. And it's quite a simplistic understanding that once you see your ratio fluctuate enough, the speed of the market increase so much that this is no longer a 0-degree line. It's no longer a hard resistance, that the targets are no longer lower than there. Because if I were to take this 0 degrees and I pump it up to say 0.2, well, that's going to give me a whole other set of results. And so that's what I'm going to do. And a simple way to do that in Optima is I would name this one here $10, or sorry, 10 cents, right? You know, I know what that means, 10 cents, that's my ratio. And I'll then take this here, clone the layer, and I'll mute out the other one. And now this is my 20-cent layer. I'm gonna make a 20-cent layer. It's basically double the speed, double the sized geometric targets. And I'll knock out my horizontal lines. I just want the same settings. I want my retrograde cycles up there. And now I'm going to take my planetary lines. Let's make them 0.2, 20 cents. And let's take my price degree intervals. I want to see them at 0.2. Well, now look at that. It's no longer 360 degrees. It's no longer a 0-degree line. It's a 180-degree line. And therefore, my target is up here. You know, we've had recent targets of different planets, Jupiter retrograde, Saturn retrograde. Let's take a look at those things. But generally, you know, you're seeing how these targets have expanded. And now we can take these and project them forward. And I can, again, just pre-prepare this at the beginning of the cycles or the beginning of the year. I can make a whole bunch of different ones and make sure that I'm prepared whether the market's moving 10 cents or 20 cents. It's really simplistic. And if you know exactly what's up here, it's very simplistic. It's exactly what you're doing when you're dealing with a Gann fan. As it reaches new levels of the Gann fan, that's like the market moving at different ratios. If the Gann fan is set to $1 per day, well, then the 2 by 1 is a $2 per day line, and the 3 by 1 is a $3 per day line. So it's just giving you that different ratio information, the price unit information on a different level, but the speed of the market, how fast it's moving. As the market expands, we need to expand our geometric targets. Now, I like to look at volume, and I'm sure that if this becomes a little bit tedious for people, especially my students, they like to, I drill volume into them because I like to watch volume for change in ratio. As soon as I see volume break average prices or average levels, I'm looking for the market to give me a much bigger movement. Therefore, if there's some geometry that works out that day, I have to be concerned that the higher ratio market movement will happen. It's quite powerful because, again, you've got this set up. You don't have to worry about the fact if it's going to 1 or 2. You've just got it set up. I can even look at them layered. I can, especially if I get rid of these large bars, you know, and I set up those a way to identify the cycle a little more clearly. So I don't really have to look at volume. I don't have to look at ratio. I don't have to take readings. I could just be prepared for all the circumstances. I can know that as I come in, one or the other is a target. I can see the likely target as it comes in. Those ones don't look too different from each other, but let's get some bigger targets. Let's jump and let's go to 5. This Mercury retrograde, it's an important one, and we want to see it work out well. Let's see here, 0.5. Okay. Take it here, and planetary lines. So you realize that for these different planets, you might have a few different targets. And then as the cycles come in, you're paying attention to those targets. Okay. And so this is a higher ratio setting. This is now 0.5. And now as the market was exceeding, you know, crazy new highs and new levels of volume with all of the, whatever you want to call it, market manipulation or anything you want to call it, the the money printing going on. There's just a lot of cash on the market, a lot of volume, a lot of trading going on. And therefore, we need to be prepared for that bigger setting to come out. Let's see, are we setting 0.5 on our price degree intervals as well? Okay, and now look at this. When I was in this big period here, and this happened on a lot of different markets. This is Netflix, but even this Netflix, which became everybody's golden stock here recently. Let's just take our horizontal line, and of course, pulling it across here. All that's the date of direct. That's the price there on the previous cycle, and that's almost a perfect call. During the shadow, it came. I mean, it took a while. It took a while for the ratio to get there. It took a while for the market to build up the volume and to build up the averages enough that it needed to correct to a whole new level. Okay, and you can see that it did drop. It dropped to the other level there. It had another target up way up here, or actually over here. It had this target. Sorry, this target was also being called technically, but once you see the fall, this is your target, especially if you see the market exceeding the targets that are related to 2 or 1. And we can see here, this is also, I can remove the 5 lines. Let's go back to the 2. Let's get our cycle here. Let's look at this big fall that happened at the beginning of this year. And let's go here. So that level was important. We had a big gap. It ended up at that level. We had the markets moving and trying to stay at that level. But the volume was so heavy that the ratio started to become much bigger, and the lower target also became important to us. And therefore, we had a secondary target. As Mercury retrograde is occurring, I'm watching for the different ratios to play out. If I'm seeing it move downwards and I see the 0.1 ratio work out and then be exceeded, and then I see the 0.2 ratio exceeded, and then I see the 0.5 working out and the market turning, well, hey, I've got a good sign. And like I said, the shadow is important. It's not disconnected from this period. I would always observe the shadow. I would consider it as a part. If these planetary calls were working out during the shadow, it's not uncommon. It happens all the time. Okay, like the whole period is important, and that's why it becomes a bit of navigating all of these different cycles on top of each other. What if there's an important Saturn retrograde, or not an important one, just in general a period of time when there's a couple more planets coming in? You need to kind of be aware of each level that the different ratios are playing out. But you'll not be looking at multiple levels of multiple planets. You'll just be looking at one ratio that's working out, and it'll be more clear to you as the dates get closer. And yeah, you're looking for change in trend during that period of time, but also you're looking for a market to react to a particular target range. If you see this turning here and not moving upwards towards its higher targets, you have a good reason to believe that the lower targets are going to work out. It's a little bit like support and resistance, but also you have actual price targets involved. Kind of like you have a crossing of an intersection in a Gann box, things like this, but it's more particular, more specific, right? And if I were to take, that time retracement, you would look for connections even within the shadow. And when the shadow cycle is taking place, whoops, there we go. And we got a bottom here at the 38.2, basically. Let's pull it a little closer. Again, I would probably, with the Mercury retrograde, I might pull in on a 4-hour, or sorry, a 1-hour chart or a 4-hour chart. Can do that. It's one great thing about working with the planets is that if you've got lots of data, you don't have to worry about your geometries all being thrown off. This is per degree. So I'm not changing anything more than jumping to a lower time frame, but my planets stay in the same spot. They'll stretch and contort to the time frame, but they're staying at the exact same price at the exact same time. So let's take a look at those calls, working out really well even on a shorter time frame. but we can only see so far back. I've only got a couple months of minute data for US equities. I don't really need too much of that. But I think you're seeing important things here playing out. So I've already done an hour on retrograde planets, and I've only gone through Mercury and Jupiter. But what I want to do now, I'm just going to pull up a chart here. I've got a preset Bitcoin chart. Well, maybe I'll just import it into here so that we can keep our workbook open. And I've got my Bitcoin retrograde chart. Shared this with some of my students. And here we go. So this is what a completed chart might look like. I analyze volume, I do all kinds of stuff, but this is what I would share with somebody if I was looking towards, what's going to happen during Jupiter retrograde this year. Well, I would look towards the previous cycle. I would project it forward, and I would look towards, if you look at this stack of all my planets, I kind of set it up just like you saw me doing it. I just work two or three price ranges, especially with the tighter numbers, like say $10 or $20. With this is Bitcoin, so I'm using ratios of $20, $50, $100, $10. You see that it's where the stock is sitting in price that generally tells you what the ratio should be. But also you can just generally get that information by taking a measurement, just like I did before. Gann-Fan line from the top to generally the bottom. Even at most, it was moving at $38 per, in this case, days, right? So you're getting ratio information about how fast the market moves, therefore the average range that your ratios sit within. And therefore, if this is 30, well, or 38, whatever, my ratios are going to be 10 or 20 or 50, or maybe 40. I might look at those kinds of things. I might try to get a little more exact if I can. I've got ways of reading volume and relating ratio to volume. So I just, I might have many different reasons. I might use my different indicators, my VWAPs. I like those. I like my VWAP tools. And it shows you that the targets are working out and gives you that extra confirmation, right? Get rid of that. And here we have our bubble in 2019 last year, right during Jupiter retrograde. And you can see these levels that were called all within here. This is 0 degrees here. Let's make sure that we've got everything right. 0 degrees. So that's set to $20 per degree. This is our Jupiter $20 per degree lines. I'll show you the Jupiter Gann planetary line settings there. That's the $20, and it's set to Jupiter. Okay. Now in this case, you're seeing multiple Jupiter lines per 360 degrees. I've talked about these before. We don't just want the regular Jupiter line. This is a little more complex. In the end, we also want to see the mirrored Jupiter line, the Jupiter line that's moving exactly 360 degrees opposite to the real planetary line. It's like it's basically the Jupiter line moving in the exact same, in the exact opposite direction around the circle. If this Jupiter is at 0 degrees and moves upwards, we also want to visualize something that helps us see Jupiter moving down from 360 degrees backwards. And that helps us see some form of downtrend information. Often you'll find that downtrends will work out on the downtrend line. Makes sense on that opposite geometry, okay? And so look at these calls that are working out here. We have our Jupiter retrograde cycle. I'm forwarding, let's see here. Let's see, we've got our level here. And those lines are a little off, let's correct them. So we've got our arrows. And I mean, it's not a perfect to the dollar call. I've shown that there's other cycles that we might look here. I've shown you the Uranus-Venus cycle, natal cycles previously in other webinars. So you can know that it's not just one thing going on, but the retrograde cycles are telling you this long in advance that this price level right here, it's a hot spot for this time, and also down here. And I think that what happened is multiple ratios started to play on top of each other here on my layers. Let me see here. This is my $50. There we go. That's a little more clear. This is our $50 per degree. You know, on this run, if we know that on average it was moving at somewhere like $38 per degree, or $38 per day, we know that this part of the market was moving way faster than that. And this is working out at $50 per degree. But maybe we want to see 100. So let's see 100. Remember, if I set this to 100, you realize that we're seeing the planetary geometry where 360 degrees is $36,000. It's way up here. Sorry, losing control there. 36,000, that's 0 degrees. Let's see our 0 degree line. I don't know why I'm not seeing it here. Make sure we can always know where 0 degrees is, especially with this technique. And again, it's $100 per degree. So $18,000 being 180 degrees. You can see even from our 2017 bubble, we had some amazing numbers being called there. Okay. But, you know, there's other cycles. There was our Mercury $100 cycle here that I would also project for the top, because the top was during Mercury retrograde. And so I would project those levels, definitely. As I see a market going out of control like Bitcoin was doing at that time, I would definitely want to look at the higher ratios. Look how well that works, right? Basically at the 618 of the Mercury cycle, I'm sure you're realizing. This isn't something that just doesn't, it plays out on every single market. I'm not picking and choosing. Hopefully that's clear to you. Now, to define these things without a software like Optima, I'm not exactly sure how you do it, but you know, I mean, if there is a way to do this, you can get the degree of the planetary retrograde the last time, make a price degree conversion manually, and have price ranges for yourself, and also proportioning out the period of time. It's not impossible. Okay. And the charts look really fancy in here, but also with a pencil and paper, you realize you can basically do this stuff. So let's knock out our Mercury retrograde. And you can see that Mercury lines. Just wanted to show that again, that $100 per degree for Jupiter, that worked out really well. And that is the mirror line, meaning downtrend information. And where is the top coming in? And that's a common thing to watch for. A top being the start of a downtrend. Therefore, we're getting actual downtrend information from these downward lines, and therefore we're getting a top coming in there, right near, see that? Right near the price, almost perfect. And that's really awesome when you see that occurring, because you're seeing the complementing levels being broken, and also you can do your price measurement. You can take your Gantt fan, you can just take it from, say, somewhere here, an average price, that speed, up to about $76 on average. You know it's moving up towards $100 per degree. That's very valuable information right there. As the market's moving almost vertical, well, I'm moving to $100 per degree. I want to see that. But also, if you can see, I've also got my volume. My volume is breaking a level that is related to a box that I've set. In this case, it's set to 1 billion, okay? And it's just a square of one. It's a 1 by 1 for volume. It's a $1, in this case, $1 billion per day. But you might want to look at it more like a maximum. The 1 by 1 for volume is a maximum of about $1 billion per day. That is directly relatable to when the market is moving $100 per degree or day. But that's something that I get into detail with my students. It's something that would need to be discussed in detail. I know that it's simplistic to start with, but it does get more complex. I think that you realize that this is something you make a map for yourself for the whole year. You go forward in time and you just start mapping this stuff out. If you have Optimal, I'll share this file with you. You can see here in 2019, you also had Saturn retrograde, and the Saturn cycle working out really well right at the golden ratio too. But of that part of the cycle coming in at the 38.2, whereas on the Jupiter cycle was the 61.8. Let's take a look here at Venus, because Venus recently went retrograde. I'll look at the Venus $50. That was the last time Venus went retrograde, and take a look at that projected forward. Mercury, the price coming in and basically at the 61.8, or sorry, that's the 50. That's the 50%. That's the midpoint. Always a particularly powerful point. Just before it, you're getting that nice connection to the price range. And I'm sure that the $20 could be related to the entrance into retrograde. So let's look at that. And yeah, as retrograde started here in May, the price jetted towards the $20 per degree target, which can be directly related to the previous retrograde cycle. And why is Venus powerful? Well, if it's happening less often and the planet moves quickly, there is a very good possibility that the ranges between these different places, these different times and places in price or levels of price, that the difference is going to be quite great. The market might move quite far from all these points in between. And if we know that the Venus cycle is going to come back, well, we've got a long-term swing to look forward to. And the market could be extremely imbalanced like it was. And look at that bottom there coming in basically, on the level that was associated to a previous Venus retrograde. And Venus retrograde is coming in. It's the next retrograde cycle that's significant, much like Mars. And Mars is in the future too, coming in soon. So I don't want to go through every single planet on every single market, but realize that I'm focusing on the ones that I am because they're important, but also all of them are working. But the planets that have the biggest swings themselves, they move the fastest, and also that have particular portions of time between their retrograde cycles, they're going to produce the biggest movements, and I would focus on them. Okay, so Venus is important. Mars is a really important one. Okay, Mercury is a really important one, and it's coming in soon. Let's just take a quick look. I didn't do that. Let's just take a quick look. The market's moving quite quickly right now. Let's take a look at the $50. That's my own. I'm doing a quick reading. My volume is about 50%. You see, really simple thing. But recently it was moving well above 50%. But again, that's something that would need to be discussed further. We're meeting a midpoint in some cycles that are important here, and we're getting up to a top. But let's take a look. Mercury, $50. Well, this is kind of, it's not good enough. We need our retrograde cycle. There we go. And we'll look at this. The last time that we had the retrograde cycle at $50, when the market was moving towards $50, we had this huge plunge. You could directly relate those levels to the Mercury retrograde cycle. There is also Uranus to look at. So I would take a look at Uranus when in reference to Bitcoin. But you realize how powerful that is. Now, why didn't it go up to there? Well, there's lots of reasons, but it is a bit of a guess in some sense. You've got to deal with many different things going on. The actual day of Mercury retrograde being an actual, a usual call for change in trend, looking towards the actual first day, and then the price jetting towards the target. Why does it commonly call for a down day on a Mercury retrograde? Well, because we commonly see these return to swings that have happened previously. But also, if the market is moving upward, and this is a change in trend coming, well, the logical change is to move the opposite direction. And if it's commonly a swing top or bottom marker, well, this is a good indication that even though we have calls that are up here, up in the highs, as Mercury crosses the 180 line here, we're kind of concerned that it's still going to create a downward motion. We have to be at least aware that it could happen. Okay. So it's definitely not going to go down every time. You have the levels. What happens if it was perfectly balanced as it came in and all these different calls were working perfectly? Let's take a look at the 20% or the $20 per day Mercury lines at this point. Well, look at that. A perfect catch there as well. And again, a top coming in on the downward line, kind of signaling that you're getting a downtrend inward. And where did it fall? Well, a very significant level associated to this level of ratio as well. And the market here was moving between, say, 20% and 50% of a billion. So it's really fluctuating here, not necessarily at $50 per degree, but even down to $20 per degree at the beginning of the cycle. And therefore, that working out perfectly at $20 per degree is no mystery. It worked out perfectly. And it's a good change, a good chance for a change. But as soon as we see the market moving so huge and fluctuating so greatly, I would definitely want to know what the $50 targets are. And we just jump up. Already got it planned out. I don't have to create it again. Okay, we've got some lower calls. And yeah, the market went even lower than that. But I've shown you how it related heavily to a Venus call. There was many other reasons why the market went here. We're not talking about absolute every swing, but you're seeing how many swings that can be defined here. Okay. So that was about an hour and a half on retrograde cycles. And it is just scratching the surface, but I would implore you to use your trial of Optima. If you own a software, try to map these ideas out and use them logically. It's not just about drawing a line on here. What is this line? This is the position that Mercury was in the last time it went retrograde, and we were looking at this time. So if we were looking at February 2020, I'd be looking back to November 2019 and seeing where was Mercury. Mercury was at this degree. I can look at ephemeris if I want to. So there's many reasons or many ways to do this, but it's obviously a lot easier. I can show you more visually here, and I can sort of go through like many different examples. Okay. So I think that's a good place to stop with the retrograde planets. Does anybody have any direct questions they want to throw out here? I know maybe many people have many, and if you want your voice, I can try to give you your voice. You could ask a question, or I could just save questions for the end and we can do it then. Maybe if everybody's want to shoot a little note, we'll give a 5-minute break and then I'll move into the Wheel 24 because it is another big topic. It's not directly connected. The two things could be used together, but we're talking two different big topics here. Make sure everybody is okay here. I'm just taking a look at all my settings. Maybe I can just get everybody to let me know that everything's okay in the chat. You could all still hear me, right? Great, great guys, thank you. Andres. I'm seeing that I did get some bounces from my emails here. So hopefully everybody got it. I don't know how to, I guess I gotta deal with a new mail system maybe. I did see 13 people at one point, which technically not 13 people were supposed to attend. So that means that a couple extras also got in, some of my other students. And they said they were only gonna get the video in the end. Okay, guys, so I'm just gonna move on then, I guess. I'm gonna have to sort of set up some stuff. Direct questions about retrograde. Would you like to do that? Direct questions about retrograde. Amber, do you have any questions about retrograde? Would you like, yeah, you can type it in there or I can give you your voice. Oh, okay, great. So basically, I'm just, I'm also going to be here. You're going to have a copy of this video to download, watch, rewatch. I'm available for questions always by email, especially for somebody who is my student. I would gladly answer. I'm overly long-winded. I'm sure that all of my students have noticed that. I can't help it because this stuff is just so, you need to be verbose. You need to be able to explain so many different things. And a simple question never has a simple answer, but when you really break it down, this is a long period of time. You're looking ahead in, years, even sometimes when you're dealing with Mars. So you're really only making these charts so often. You're not digging into the retrograde cycles every day and wondering what's going to happen. No, you've got a chart. It tells you when it happens. You've got the levels. You've got the price confirming that the levels are working out, and you're trading with a trading system built on top that helps you determine, when to get out with profit, percentages. You've got to have a plan. Okay, and that's something that I would devise with the student over time. But imagine if you are trading already, if you realize that this is the idea that you've got actual price targets. Yeah, they're within a range, but the ranges can be quite large. And those ranges expand as the market expands and they become even more clear. And they could get bigger and bigger in a sense, just like it did in the past year. Super powerful. I use this. This is the first step of my year, and when a time like the previous couple months happens, I am focused on that time. I'm pulling this down to a 1-hour chart. I'm seeing the different percentages pass of each cycle. I want to know when I'm at the midpoint of each cycle. For the longer cycles, I might want to know when I hit even the 25%, and those regular other divisions. They're long enough that I've got lots of time. I know a couple days, weeks in advance when it's going to occur. I don't have to pay attention to it every second. And yeah, this looks so messy and crazy, but when you really get down to it, it's just about getting in on the information you're specifically looking for. Okay, you're looking for the actual price to be at these levels this day and find resistance, but also a magnetism towards them. Okay, and which one is the real target? Like I started with, the real target, it's the one that comes from the target of the planet that's moving upwards. It's that planetary relationship of about $1 per degree, or maybe 10 cents, or maybe 1 cent, depending on where the stock or commodity or whatever you're trading sits. Okay, but think of how powerful that is. You're not only getting actual price time square outs on the days of the retrograde coming in, usually that's what you're going to find, at least at some ratio that can be directly associated to the speed of the market or the flow of volume. Okay, but you've got this kind of information well in advance, and you've got these long-term cycles that take a long period of time. So you've got multiple periods within those periods to pay attention to. It becomes a lot to look at, but it's also a long period of time. I just like to stress that it's not all so much at once. Okay, I'm trying to show you a lot at once because it's so much to show. It's so much, I've got to prove so much to you. So let's move on here. I'm going to save this. I'll save it as webinar 6. And remember, I know I'm going long here with my explanations, but I'm not in any kind of rush, so we're not going to get cut off. Now, begin with another clear, empty page. And I want to begin with something that's within 360 degrees or $360, something that I comply to a standard 1x1, 2 right now. And then we'll move to something slightly more complex. But again, I don't ever, people will commonly ask me, well, how do you set a wheel or geometries to $15 a day or a ratio of 0.75? I would say, well, you could do that, but I would probably round it down and I would use 1s, 2s, and 5s, just to simplify it for yourself. Okay, you're still going to get exact price time square outs. You're still going to get wonderful places to take profits and put your stops. Maybe you're not going to find necessarily the exact top or exact bottom to the day, but you're going to have a very good indication. Or you can get in closer and look at those other things going on, like the wheel of 24 showing you the planetary cycles on a really detailed level. And so let's pull up, well, I mean, we were looking at gold, but let's pull up a miner. Let's look at Eldorado Gold. There we go, a miner, the one that everybody lost a lot of money on, as usual. So when we look at this stuff, just like before, we could pull our planetary cycles with our planetary lines and do our retrograde. And I'm sure that you know that the planetary retrograde cycles that occurred here will probably work very well here. Let's move on though from that. So this is Gann's famous Wheel of 24. If I right click in Optima, I can pull it up from anywhere. I just go open for date, like I could pull up an ephemeris. I could also pull up the Wheel of 24. Why is that important that it's set to a date? Because the planets, we're going to be using the planets on the Wheel of 24. Now, we need to pull these two things together. We're just like the ephemeris, we drew the planets onto the page. We drew the planets onto the chart. This is the same process, but it's from a different perspective. We can get much closer and we can define different kinds of movements with this. It's not about aspects, it's not about natal cycles, it's not about retrograde periods. This is a special tool that allows us to see the planetary geometry playing out constantly without really even needing to know much about planets or their cycles. This is a special tool that was designed to see many different harmonics of planets at once, which helps us actually see a multitude of ratios at once. This is like the law of vibration built into one tool here. It's really amazing. And so what I'm going to do, just like before, $1 per degree. But you know what? This is sitting in below $36. So let's go to 10 cents. Okay. You realize immediately, well, why did I want to start with something that was at 10 or a dollar? Well, look at this. If I go down here, I could really only set my wheel to ones. I can only set it to hard numbers. I can't do 1.5 increment, right? The scale only goes 1 degree at a time. Okay. So I do want to begin. I'm going to move on to a different stock just for now, but I will talk about how to deal with something that would be at this range. Okay. So I'll begin with something like SPY. There we go. Everybody's favorite SPY. Works with anything, remember, but you might all want to be trading this. So when I take my planetary lines this time, I'm going to be setting them a little bit differently. We're going to be relating them to two different cycles of 360 degrees, and they're both different. They're related to price differently. Okay, we've got one cycle of 360 degrees, which is just our standard planetary cycle. So I'll put those down. I'm going to put, just like the ephemeris before, I could use my price degree interval tool, which shows us where our 0 degrees is. Let's set that, like I said, to $1 per degree. Okay, that means where's our 360? Well, that's at $360. 180, that's $180. Let's get a couple more divisions there. Let's see our 90. Let's see our 270. Okay. Let's make them all white so you can see them a little more clearly. Okay. So it's just our standard planetary cycle, our 360 degrees of planetary movement defined onto price. Very basic. Now I've got a separate scale. I've got what you're seeing right now is this outer scale. You're seeing those planets in their actual position, right? So if I were to take my planetary lines, again, planetary lines, and I would set it to $1 per degree, right? Oops, $1 per degree. There's my Jupiter, and in this case, I might want to see all of the planets or a whole bunch of them. Maybe I like 2 or 3. I want to see a combo. But in this case, I'm just going to let you see what it looks like when you set up all these different planets together. Don't worry if I miss one. Just generally, you're seeing how you're seeing all of the different planets crossing all of the different degrees that they do. It gets a little bit messy, but it's literally every single planetary position being shown to you in price. Okay, every pass. And it's set to 360 degrees. But we've got a different series of 360 degrees here. We've got 360 degrees being related to $24 at $1 per degree. So each circle here is $24, but it's also 360 degrees of a circle. And it's taking 360 degrees and it's breaking it up into 24. And that's exactly what you're seeing. You're seeing 24-degree harmonics of 360 degrees. And therefore, if I were to draw those cycles onto the chart, they wouldn't look like our standard 360 degrees, which is being related at $1 per degree to a total of $360, and then repeating. This is going to show me the wheel of 24 is a little bit like a nested cycle within our 360 degrees, because 24 fits perfectly into 360 degrees 15 times. That means 15 rows of the wheel of 24 is 360 degrees exactly. And I can prove that to you. There's your 359th degree. Your next degree would be 360. It's set to over here. The wheel setting is an increment of 1 degree per dollar. So it's starting at 0, 1, 2, 3, going around. And look how many rings, 15 rings. Okay. Now, the wheel 24 is a little bit complex. You need to know where you are in the wheel. You need to know where the price is on the wheel. And it's not just about being at 360 degrees. It's also within the individual circles of 360 degrees nested within the larger 360 degrees. And there's a tool here called the wheel of 24. It's called a static wheel of 24. Just like our price degree intervals, which place our degrees down onto the screen in relation to price, this is going to do the same, but it's going to relate those smaller cycles in between. And we've got to zoom right in now. And now I'm going to take a look. Whoops. Oh, let me try that again. Wheel of 24, static wheel of 24. And got a little bit of oh, there we go. Okay, a little glitch going on there. No problem. All right. So here's the idea. Let's just knock out that other cycle, that 360 degree cycle that we were looking at. Now we're taking our static wheel of 24, set to $1 per degree. It gets really tight. Okay. And I want to see 15 rows of it. So I can set this setting 15 revolutions. Okay. And when I put up my other price degree intervals again, just to see against there, at 15 rows, I should see, yes, 0 degrees. At the top here, we're getting a full revolution of 360 degrees that's being broken down into 15 segments of these 24-degree 360-degree cycles. These are wheels within wheels. This is right out of Gann's books. We're going to use the planets in a special way, though, here, because we're not just using time. We're not going to relate it necessarily to the outer positions of time and the dates. Okay. I like to set my wheel up this way, where 0 is on the right and it goes around, and you've got 90 at the top, and then you've got September here on the left. I mean, it's based on my studies from Jeannie Long and her Universal Clock book. But you might find that some people like it backwards. It doesn't matter. The geometry works the same as long as you're not changing the relationships. Okay. So again, this gets maybe a little bit complex, but it's something that you can dig in further and ask me questions about. But the idea is this, that the thing that we're watching for here is 15 rows of 24 degrees to be associated to price. In this case, at $1 per degree, we get one scale, which is 360 degrees at $360. And then every $24, I've got another small scale of 360 degrees. Let's take a look here. Maybe I can make that a little more clear. Okay. And so I think immediately you're seeing that especially at this ratio where we're dealing with $1 per degree, this is not necessarily a tool for trading daily at this ratio. We might want to get in and look at different smaller time frames, and that's totally true. But I do want you to see, generally, just like before with the planetary retrograde cycles, you're realizing that the cycles of the planets are having an effect. The position that they were in previously being, important and calling it in the future. And so that is why the structure of the planetary lines is echoed in the price so well. And when we kind of zoom out here and take a look, if I remove my tight lines, and these are just the positions again of the planets, right? From $0 to $360, 180 in the middle. You can see that the price is riding Saturn, which is the orange line, Jupiter, which is the blue line, and it's just following and following. We've got our Saturn and Jupiter conjunction coming up in the future soon this year. Let's move like maybe 500 bars into the future here and see a little more, right? We've got our conjunction there where they come together, and the price being perfectly in line with that price already and following those for many years, it was following those planets. You can see finding a midpoint at some point, realizing that if we were to drop in ratio because the market was moving much slower here, they'd be sitting right together, just like they are up here when the price is moving much quicker. Okay, so Saturn and Jupiter, just for support and resistance on a long period of time, it makes sense. But what are we seeing? We're seeing the planetary lines, but they are the positions on the ephemeris. And realizing that if we're dealing with the Wheel of 24, we're just seeing the actual positions of the planets. Okay. But the Wheel of 24 gives us some extra information. Just like you saw those internal cycles, we will now look at the 24-degree harmonics of the Wheel of 24 here. Okay. So here we go. We've got that set up already, our static wheel. And then let's get zoomed right in because this is going to get a little bit messy. And I think the best idea here, I would probably go down to a 4-hour at least. Let's pull up our 4-hour chart. Hope I got enough data there. Yeah, there we go. There's a nice structure here. And we could see a little more detail. We can zoom right in. I like to concentrate on individual levels of 360 degrees. Okay. And you can see that if I was here and this price was in this area here, well, there's no planets. Well, that's because the actual planet is on a different row of the wheel, right? So if I were to come here onto my wheel, and let's see where the price was in this day here. Let's say it's at 288 at the high here, at the middle 276. So we know that that is 360 degrees, and that is 180 degrees. Well, we know that the wheel is set to 1-to-1, so we could just enter the price of the actual stock as the day. So let's do the 276 as our price. Okay, 276, and we can see, just like here at 276, when the price was here at 180 degrees, on the wheel, it's also at 180 degrees. This is 180 degrees of the outer wheel. Okay? But it's also 180 degrees of this inner wheel. Okay. And so if I were to look in here, and I were to look at the next dollars up from the price that we're at here, it's 276, 277, 278. Those are the actual dollar values. And if I were to go all the way around this ring, I would find that until the price, let's see here, was up here, got Saturn right there, okay? So the real position of the price, that's a little bit of a mystery, 1 second. 267, and the price jets up. There we go. $1 per degree. Planets $1 per degree. The idea is that you want to know generally what level you're in here, okay? What level of 360 degrees you're sitting in, all right? So the real planet will tell you, where is the real planet? 288, 289, 290. Getting a little bit of a funny result here. Sorry, I think I need to reset something here. Let me try something here, sorry. I'm gonna delete these planetary lines and reset them. This is set to $1 per degree. And let's take our Gann planetary lines, also set them to $1. Jupiter being at, there we go. Oh, I thought I had already set the date. Okay, there we go. That makes more sense. Alrighty. Oh gosh, okay. So what was happening was the wheel was set to a different day. I guess I had double clicked elsewhere. But we're looking here in this area here. We're looking to see for the price to basically be not near any planets within this range here from 264 to 288. There's no planets there. We know that from our Gann planetary lines, how I had it set up with all those different planets. Right? Let's get those different planets up there again. Mercury, Venus, Mars, Uranus. Anyways, you get the picture, I think. You're looking for an empty sky, essentially. Within this one row, there is no planets on this date. And let's look all the way around. I'm following it. I'll put the diamond, and I've aligned it to the circle so that we can see that there. Okay. Now there's some alignments on the circle. You might be seeing some planetary alignments to the different corners of this tool here. But generally what I'm just looking for is that within this, you can see that there is no planets. And this is where we get to sort of, identify easily where we are on this wheel. If I were to look back a little bit, zoom out a little bit, and I look for, say, Saturn, wherever the day that I'm on, right? Like, let's say if I'm down here at the bottom, I'm going to set the ephemeris or the wheel to that date. The planets are going to move to where they were that day. The price way down, 218. So I come over here, I punch in the price of 218. There we go. Price is up here at $218. I'll align it to there. And again, I'm not seeing any planets in this area. Those glyphs are the planets. The white ones are just planets that are moving in a direct direction, and then when they go retrograde, they turn red. Okay, that's how my settings are set. So if you're seeing that within this range of $24, which is 360 degrees, there is no planet. If the price was up here on this day, during this time when all those planets were retrograde by chance, if you noticed, all those red planets, we can see that the price was, say, up around this time. It was at 294, around 90 degrees, right? Let's punch that in, 294. And where's the price going to be? Let's see, 294. Well, it's showing you that 294 is the actual position of Pluto on the wheel. But let's move a little bit here. You can see that Jupiter is right there. So you can see that within this line, within this row, the price is with these planets that are the actual positions, right? And so it's important to know where the price is on the wheel in relationship to the real planets. And why is that? Because as I get in here, now I start to create some new relationships to these planetary degrees. I don't want to just see the real position of the planet. I want to see the 24-degree harmonics. So as I zoom in here, it's going to give me a lot more information. I'm going to go down to an hourly because it's going to get a little bit too much. Okay, let's let that load. And you realize, when you're dealing with this stuff, it's going to get tough for your computer to load all of this information sometimes. You're going to have to sort of deal with that a little bit. But let's get our other information on here. I don't want my regular GAN planetary lines. I've got a special tool, and I'm going to show you. I've already got it saved, but I'll show you what it's all about. I'll close my planetary lines there. I'm going to import this layer. Import layer. And I've got my wheel of 24 and my static wheel. And I'm going to pop it in there. It might look a little bit weird at first. Okay, so it's set to some different settings. All these different lines, they're just showing me the different planets. So let's zoom in on the settings of each one. Here, this one is set to $50 per unit. So that's what's going on. The lines are so vertical because the unit rate is completely off. So I'm going to change them all together. But basically what you're seeing is Jupiter. But instead of just seeing Jupiter, which is the actual Jupiter position, this is called, they call it the conjunction line. It's just the actual position of Jupiter on the screen converted to price. But then we also want to see a custom angle, a different harmonic that isn't sort of standard to the regular aspects that we use in astrology. It's a hard 24-degree harmonic. Every 24 degrees, I want to see the entire cycle of Jupiter, and I want to see every time it passes 24 degrees, I want to see another line start at 0. That's what's happening. So if I were to take all these lines, let's set them all up in Optima. I can just take them here. And if I hold Control and I right click, if I hold Control and then I click on each one, it's going to allow me to select all of them. And I can just change the unit ratio of all of them. Now my computer might take a second to work all of this stuff out. $1 per day, right? $1 per degree. So let it all work out there. And I'm also going to reduce the symbol size. It's just giving you a reading of the harmonic that you're seeing, and you're seeing the symbol of the planet here right up against the price scale. But I'm just going to make that smaller so it becomes a little bit more visual. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit here. Now you can tell why I went down to an hourly now. Okay. Now what you're seeing is the different levels of 360 degrees. But what we're seeing for the planetary positions is not just the actual positions, but you see them there. Those are those thick lines that you see. Those are those actual positions of, in this case, the orange line is Saturn, blue line is Jupiter, this darker blue line is Pluto, okay? But those fainter lines that you see, they're labeled with a number 24 on them. I've made them a little bit thinner and a little bit dotted. And that's to denote to me that those are the 24-degree harmonics. And those are just the position of the planets on this single row, and it's being related to a degree. And so if Saturn is sitting here on the wheel of 24 at, in this case, we know it's actually at over 300 degrees. Well, let's make sure that we're looking at the right place here. Let's get here. Okay. Saturn is still in that same spot. We're here recent times. And Saturn is at about 300 degrees, but on the wheel of 24, in our 360 degrees around this circle, when it's broken up into 24-degree or $24 segments, Saturn is actually just over 200 degrees. Okay, it's a weird relationship. But if you look in here, look at that. Directly you're seeing that Saturn here is just sitting above 180 degrees, which is here, and it's just above. And so even though that's the real position of Saturn, sitting at 300 degrees, when we were looking at that other scale, when we had our price degree intervals out there, okay, if I were to punch in here 300 degrees on my price degree interval tool, I would see that it's also in that exact same place at $1 per degree. You can see that at this day here, when Saturn was just over here, just over 300 degrees, you can see it. 300 degrees is $300 at $1 per degree. But on the Wheel of 24, it's $180. And Saturn is sitting just above it. And it's sitting at just above it on every other harmonic of the Wheel of 24 as well. And so just above, we should find at just over 180 degrees, another Saturn line. And there it is, this orange thinner line. That's 124-degree movement above the real position of Saturn. So what this is telling me is that within the day, or within a shorter amount of time, I can see the different effects of each planet moving around this circle, but it's going to be related to price, even if price is not on the actual ring that the planet is sitting on. It's a harmonic, it's a 24-degree harmonic. So we're looking for planets to group up on the rows of the Wheel of 24. And then we're looking at the price to interact with these full rows that represent a harmonic of any planet that might be sitting on that row. Okay. And so on this very day, every single row, like on the day that we have the wheel set to right now, on this row where Jupiter is here, the symbol for Jupiter is retrograde, it's red, Mercury is also sitting on that exact same row. Okay. They aren't necessarily in any kind of aspect necessarily. They're just this many degrees apart. But when they come to those many degrees apart, they are this far apart on the wheel, but also they're on the same row. And if I were to then look in at our chart between 360 degrees, let's see, 0 is here, 360, 288, and then 360 degrees is up there. Okay, I've got Jupiter, the blue line, over here. This is a thick line, right? But look at Jupiter on this very day where I have the price set, or where I have the ephemeris set. It's crossing with the purple line, which is Mercury. It's a harmonic of Mercury because Mercury's way down. Okay, it's down at 81 degrees on this day. But on the Wheel of 24, 81 degrees is actually here with Jupiter at just over about 140 degrees. And we can look at here on the wheel. Yeah, there we go. Okay, under 180, over 100 and, under 180, over 90 degrees on the wheel. And you can see the crossing of the two planets. And it's no surprise that the price jetted upwards and wanted to not only be at the price that the crossing occurred at, but it wanted to continue on with Mercury on a longer term, especially on sort of this zoomed out scale. I mean, I know this is an hourly chart, but I'm showing you days at a time here. You're going to want to watch for the price to follow things like Mercury, the Sun, and Venus even up through this cloud of planets. And I know it seems like a lot of information all at once, but let's just take a look. Let's try to see that. Let's try to visualize it. As we cross 0 degrees here, it's crossing with this green line. This green line here is the Sun. Okay, I'm telling you that. You could actually look right over here. It's showing you. There's a little circle there. That's the Sun. Okay, but you can try that. It's basically the position of the Sun that day. It's actually the position of the Sun 288 degrees. But on the Wheel of 24, it's at 0 degrees that day. And it's significant. It's crossing there and the price is there with it. And yeah, the price did drop below, but where did it find support? On Mercury. And where was Mercury on the day that it crossed 0 degrees again? Well, Mercury was at 0 degrees. And let's look for that kind of interaction to constantly be occurring as Mercury comes up and makes relationships to different planets here. Let's look at Mercury crossing Pluto. The price is there. Let's look at here. We have Venus and Jupiter crossing each other. The price is there. Here we have, as we're coming on, we have Venus and Mercury crossing. The price is here up at Mercury. Here we have Mercury and Jupiter crossing each other. The price is there and jets upwards. Mercury crossing with Saturn and with Uranus and with the Sun. Well, we have that relationship there. And anybody who's already versed with planetary harmonics or planetary aspects, you realize that on these days, if this is a 24-degree harmonic, well, any aspect that can be related to 24 degrees is going to show up as a crossing on our wheel of 24. So even if these planets are far away from each other, the days that they cross together at those specific times, like a quintile aspect is 72 degrees. Well, that divides perfectly by 24. So if you can find your system of 24-degree harmonics, you also might want to find that those crossings occur that day. And we could do things like this in, Optima here. I've got a planetary angle tool. I can just bring it down here, planetary angles. I just want to see, in this case, I want to see every time Mercury crosses the 24 line, or what I call the 24 line, or what other people, Jian Long calls it, the 24 line. It's just the 360 or 0-degree marker of the wheel of 24. But that's this position here, right? Or this position here, or any other position up above, right? 360 degrees, being related to the wheel of 24. And so if I want to see every time Mercury crosses that line, all I need to do is see every time Mercury crosses 24 degrees. It's really simple. Every time Mercury hits a relationship to 24 degrees, or every time it moves 24 degrees from 0 degrees, we're going to see it cross the wheel of 24 line. And we can point those days out to ourselves. So here we go, every 24. And I want to see it repeat every angle, repeat angle. And let's get that, I'll make it purple and I'll make it nice and big. Okay, let's even show a line and let's extend the line. There we go. So you can see that it really gives you some nice timing information as well. You're getting some good changes during that time, because as Mercury crosses the 0-degree line, the price is sort of magnetized towards that location. Okay. But as you can see in this case, as the Mercury crossed that line, it wasn't there. The price wasn't there. And it's probably because of multiple things going on. But what you're doing is you're watching for the price to be above Mercury here, and you're long until it's not. And then once it falls beyond Mercury, you're looking for it to fall and find support on some other line and find a crossing. Like here, you've got it crossing of Jupiter and Venus again. And so let's actually pull that up on the wheel. Let's look at this day here. I'm going to pull it up on the wheel. We've got our wheel, and I'm here, crossing of, that is, I believe that is me. Oh no, that's the sun, and that is Jupiter. Okay, this green line is the sun, and that's Jupiter. You've got to come up with a system of your own to keep track of which line is which. Again, Optima gives you this symbol, but I don't, I like to, you can see that's the sun, right? Okay, but I want to see all those 24s, so I knock it back a little. And so if I look at the sun, I should see that the sun is at the same line as Jupiter. And you can see that they're there together on that day. Let's draw that line together. Let's put our aligned triangle to the sun and Jupiter there. And let's get the price. What's the price that day? The price is $274-ish, so 272. Let's do that. Put the price at 272. Take a look. Well, look at that. The price is with Jupiter. It's below the real position of Jupiter, one full row below. And look at that, the price is at the actual crossing, and it's together with the planets, with Jupiter and with the sun on that day. And so within this wheel, within this particular wheel of 360 degrees, but being related to this smaller section of only $24, all those planets are together, including the price. Okay. And then as we move on, there's other prices that come up. On a day where two prices are being called, you're going to want to see something like the price move between the two spots. Here we've got the crossing of Jupiter and the sun here. Well, as we move on through the day here, let's get our ephemeris line. Oops, this one. Sorry, yellow line. There we go. That's that yellow line again, bringing our movement here. And look over here. We've got Mercury crossing the node. Okay, and that is at $282. And so from that exact moment, which the crossing occurred of the Sun and Jupiter, this is an hourly chart, remember, so it's pretty quick. We're seeing immediately the price responding to the price level that the other crossing occurred at. And where is that crossing? Well, on this exact moment of the crossings, you can see that Mercury is with the node. The node and Mercury at this price level are both just harmonics. They're not the real planet, but they are a 24-degree harmonic, and therefore the price is going to move around the wheel and align itself to this price range as well. It doesn't happen immediately. Why? Because those two events happen together. But within this range of 360 degrees that we're working within this one single rotation of $24, okay, we're looking for any event to occur and the price to want to be there within. And when we're watching for the price to jump over and move to new levels of 360 degrees, well, we're watching for planets to cross over those levels. And a common test for whether or not it's going to remain in that level is to watch for when the planet that it moved with over 360 degrees, so that was in this case Mercury, we can see that the day that Mercury crossed the 24 line, we had a huge bull run that started. Or, well, I mean, on this scale, it's huge, but it's a nice straight upward movement from that day. And we cross over 0 degrees, it finds some resistance, but it does cross. But as Mercury crosses 90 degrees there, that's when we get the pop upwards. Then as Mercury crosses 180 degrees, well, even as it crosses Jupiter and Saturn are meeting, or sorry, Jupiter and Mars are meeting there. That's a little cluster here. Let's look at that on the wheel. Okay, here we've got Mars and Jupiter all together with the price being at 294. So let's pop that price in here, 294, 294. And look at that. The price is at Pluto, it's telling me, at the 294, which that's this darker navy blue line there, okay? And you can see that it's with Venus, okay? But the price did kind of exceed there. It goes up to 296, 296 and a bit, 297 maybe. Let's put that there, 297. You can see the price just kind of popped to the level that is of Mars and Jupiter, 1 degree, 2 degrees, right? We know that it didn't quite make it all the way to 297. Okay, so it found a top basically at the level of this conjunction, but truly not a conjunction, just these relationship of these two planets in 24 degrees, okay? And finding a significant top at that level because there is also the real position of Jupiter. It's a more significant call. It's a more significant level because remember, it's relatable to a scale which has none of this other traffic. None of these other planets are with Jupiter here other than Saturn and Pluto. Just these 3 lines are at this price level. So for it to find actual resistance at the actual planet in a much heavier way, it makes a lot more sense. But it did eventually break out. When? When's the breakout time to? Well, it's time to Mercury crossing all these lines. Mercury crossing 180. Mercury crossing, again, there's your 24 degrees. Mercury crossing the 24 line. And look at this. We're up here. Where was this event of Mars and Jupiter? Up here. Again, when Mars and Jupiter are crossing a couple days later, you know, Mars has gone around this whole circle one time and it's back around, and the Mars, it's attracting the price there on that day. But also it crosses with the Sun, it crosses with Mercury. Those are our timing to find whether or not we're going to cross over these moments. And it did find quite a bit of resistance here at this downward planet. And that downward planet, well, it's Venus retrograde. Let's take a look at that in that exact moment too. You know, Venus It's over here. Okay, it's with the sun. That's a Venus and Sun conjunction. Okay, and that means that if we went to go find the real positions of Venus and the sun, we should see that the thick lines are crossing each other. Let's just take a look at that. That's happening way down at 72 degrees. So let's take a look down here. $72, right? $1 a day. $1 a degree. 72. Oh, look at that. There we go. There's our Venus, and that's our sun. Those two green lines, the little pale yellow, or sorry, the pale green, that's our sun. And the downward line, the retrograde Venus. Okay, and they're crossing that day. So that's the real position on the wheel, but the price is way up here. But it's still affecting us. It's just affecting us on this crazy relationship of 24 degrees. And the price is right at the crossing, as you can see, at the time it happens. Super powerful. If you were coming up here and you were waiting to see what was going to happen, well, again, Mercury crossing the 24 line is a sign to you that it's being attracted to this upper level. And the test of it being into this level will be Mercury crossing these other levels of, say, 180 degrees or 90 degrees. Well, Mercury's slowing down. Mercury retrograde is incoming. So you're seeing how retrograde affects this stuff, how these different crossings become affected. They become sort of constantly irregular. This is a hourly chart. The calls are pretty perfect, right? The price wants to be at a crossing. If the crossings are happening at the same time, the price is going to try to jet between the two areas. We can monitor it on the wheel. And that's how classically people would do it. Because why? Because this is so much easier to chart than all of these lines at so many different price levels. Think about it. It would just be almost impossible. There's so many different things going on there. But if I'm using a wheel, I'm seeing all this, everything that's being drawn here is here. Every relationship, every aspect that you were waiting on, important aspects of 24, of, and also 72, 144, 120, they all fit nicely into 24, okay? And so from here, we're looking for effects to help us, not just the crossings, those are powerful, and also look at the trend, that's powerful. That means that in a general sense, if you were to look here on this day, as if we just focused on Mercury, the purple line, the price is pretty much following it, and it's acting as almost like a form of a top. The price is getting to it and then falling to the different relationships that are being that are happening along the way. But as we kind of follow Mercury here, let's follow Mercury. It's in here. It's right over here, just over 0 degrees. Okay, 72. Okay, see, it's at 72 degrees. And as I start moving forward, Mercury hits the 90-degree line. And I can see that the price is very much related to $294, which if I go in here and I punch in my price at $294, oops, 294, it's moving upwards. So not only is it finding this sort of general speed with it, but we can know that the price should be at a particular price and time on a day of an important crossing or relationship. The price will not only follow Mercury, but will also be with Mercury at a very particular price and time. It will touch the Mercury line, much like when we were looking at our retrograde cycles and we were looking for on the particular day for the price to touch one of those lines. That's what we're looking for on the particular crossing. We're looking for the price to actually be at that price, and it gets quite close, a couple bucks, maybe $1. This is quite close. When you start dealing with the Wheel of 24, it's a quite close relationship. But how do you deal with this stuff? It's a target. It's not telling you up, down, left, right. It's telling you the price is here this time, this day. The price is up here at this time and this day. The price is up here at this time and this day. But how do you navigate all of that? So there's a lot of different things to do here, okay? And what I would say is, number one, use your standard geometry. There's no question. Show your Gann planetary, not your Gann planetary line. I use them so interchangeably that they become the same thing. But my Gann fan, standard stuff. But again, relating it to the idea that you've got a target. So I want to know from this day when Mercury crossed the 24 line at $1 per degree. Let's unlock it. Just place it right at 0 degrees. And I'm going to set my fan to $1 per degree. Right. Well, we realize that there's some connection here to the 1/8. It's pretty slow compared to $1 per degree. But you can play with that. You can maybe use different techniques that you might use. You might try the lower ratio, 0.1. That worked really well. So that means that you've got a price range that's working, right? And you think about this being 24 degree harmonics, and the fact that this trend really just it worked really well with a 10 cents per day, or in this case now it's 10 cents per, this is a price unit rate, right? So it's 0.1, 10 cents per bar it's set to. So it's counting 10 cents per bar on the 1/1, which is the thick green line. This is an hourly chart. So it's 10 cents per hour. It's moving up. Okay. And it's a set hard relationship to the moment it crossed the 24 line. Now, if we have a chart here that was 360 degrees, that's being split up into 24, well, remember dealing with multiple ratios. If I was dealing with, in this case, $1 per degree as my large structure that I could look at when I zoom out and I see those thick lines, and I don't have all those other lines drawn on like we did before, well, that's my $1 per degree. But then I'm chopping it up into 24 segments. And we're calling that 360 degrees. And what this should tell you is that 360 degrees divided by 24, 15. Okay. The factor or the ratio of this section, this 360 degree range, if our 360 degrees is set to $1 per degree, then this little section, the planetary ratio, is very close to something. Each 24 degree harmonic is something that can be very much related to 360 degrees divided by 15, 24 degrees. Therefore, the factor is something like 0.15. I hope that made a little bit of sense to you, but essentially you're breaking down ratio, and that's the true ratio of the Wheel of 24's relationship, the two levels. You've got your 360 degree at the set 1/1, and then you've got your smaller wheels of 360 degrees, and the relationship is by 0.15. Therefore, the planetary ratio of the smaller harmonics is actually like seeing the same planets, the bigger planets, but set to 0.15 at 15 cents per degree. And therefore you see that this relationship of 15 cents is really strong. But like I said, you might want to stick to the regular stuff, the 0.1, because you're not going to be able to really work with 0.15 on the wheel very easily. You'll have to do some special stuff, and it's unnecessary. You could do easy predictions this way. You don't need to work with some crazy ratio. Yeah, if you're a mathematician and you like that, go ahead and do it. It's no problem to me. Figure out those different ratios, okay? But we realize this is basically like when you're using the Wheel of 24, it's like giving yourself two full structures of planetary structuring, ratioing, in a sense, proportioning to work with, so that I could work on an intraday, and then I can observe those same effects on say a daily or something like that. Let's see, I would always keep multiple ratios, just like I do with my retrograde planets. I would keep a wheel that's $1 a day, maybe a wheel that's $2 a day. And then I would also probably keep a wheel that goes down to 50 cents and 1 cent a day if it was that kind of stock, okay? So let's do that one thing. Let's jump into going down to something that should be at, say, 0.5 or 0.1. because when we use the wheel, we have to make some special understandings. Okay, realize with the wheel that if I exceed the 15 rows, okay, the relationship is no longer 1 by 1. If I were to then take my wheel and my price were to, let's see, let's just by chance, if the, well, let's look at a daily. I'm just going to clone this, and I'm going to knock out this layer of detailed stuff, and just want to see daily. Okay, there we go. Knock that out now too. The idea is this, that I would want to see the planetary lines, the regular planetary lines, as I had them set up before, just the thick ones, just the actual positions, and I want to see it against the daily. So I'll put my planetary lines, and I'll take them, set them to my $1 per degree. And okay, so, I would be looking at these two things together so that I can know where I am on the wheel. And then I also know on, say, an hourly where the price should be as well. So I know on a larger scale where the price should be, in the sense that it's relating itself to the 360 degrees. And there's other kinds of, there's a sense of those same kinds of crossings that we were looking for of the different planets. Those are the different planetary aspects, all of the 1 by 1 planets. I can pull them all up again. Venus, Mars, right? Gets a little messy when you see them all. But remember, we're also looking for the same kinds of things occurring on the wheel of 360 degrees. So if you put these two things together, they become sort of like a fractal relationship. And that's, basically, I mean, the origins of fractals on the markets. You've got these planetary positions and they're working at multiple ratios, but they are the same exact positions, the same geometry, but they're fractally related. They're being set to different ratios. Therefore, they're not fitting perfectly within each other. They're irregular. And then now and then they come together, much like how our wheel of 24 fits perfectly into 360 degrees. So 15 of those perfectly fit within 360 degrees. But if you know along the way, it's not necessarily a perfect relationship. You've got a 90 working out perfectly with your 270 degrees of the larger wheel here at, let's see here, at 180 degrees. Well, yeah, it is 180 degrees of a smaller wheel as well. Okay, it's a good kind of thing to think about, the idea that the midpoints come together there. And then if I go a little further or get down to my 90 degree and my 0 degree, and I'll find that it's not like the two cycles are always aligning their 0 degrees or their perfect main points together. So there's a regular relationship between the two scales. And therefore there's sort of this push and pull, this fight. And you're going to define that pretty easily by watching multiple ratios. You might want to watch a $2 chart or a $3, or sorry, a $2 chart or a $5 chart for your S&P. Okay. In this case, this is the SPY. So we're looking at a direct $1 per degree, but we might want to see smaller stuff. So let's take a look. I've got, well, I'm Canadian, and we've got this company here. Everybody likes to trade the marijuana markets because they're so volatile. They almost move like a cryptocurrency at sometimes. So this is a big company called Weed Canopy, huge market caps, huge swings that are, very unrelated to anything that can be considered to be fundamental analysis of the company situations. Nobody's profitable in this industry. Nobody's making any money, but hey, the swings are still occurring and the money's still occurring. And if you were, looking back, we could look at our planetary retrograde cycles at this. But remember, this is sitting now within $10 to $36 here, $72. So you know that the relationship of, if I'm not going to want to look at the same relationship as something that's set like we did here on the SPY. Let's go back here. Because what I'm going to do, I'm just going to copy these straight over. I don't need to do anything special. They're the same tools. Copy and paste. This is the daily. And I want to see it on there. You realize, look how vertical those planets are. They're still working nicely with timing and still looks right, but it's a little bit too vertical to get real information from, okay? We don't know where Mercury is enough along the way here to just say that it was really doing anything to the planets in between. So we know just by the price range, obviously, that instead of the $1 per day, we're going to have to drop it down. So let's just get rid of these lines here. Let's drop our planetary lines. Let's drop it to 10 cents per day. Simple, right? No crazy mathematics to figure out our ratio. Okay. And let's get our price degree intervals, because these are the actual positions of the planets, remember? So we'll get our price degree intervals, and we'll set that to 10 cents. And now we're getting that ephemeris, the 360 degrees, the actual planet's positions. That's Mars, the red line, crossing 0, crossing 90, crossing 180, crossing 270, and then up here, crossing 0. And you can see how beautiful that worked with this. So not related to the Wheel of 24. This is just the ephemeris working with the planetary lines on the ephemeris, the price moving around the 360 degrees with the planets, finding important moments when the planet crosses a particular point on the ephemeris. But how can I trade intraday with this if I'm not finding all of these movements to find? So I can zoom right in. This is my daily. Let's keep it, right? That's my, in this case, what was it again? It was 10 cents per degree. Let's keep this. We might have to get on the intraday, but I do want to see one more thing. I want to see 10 cents a day on the wheel, because that's weird, right? We haven't looked at that yet. And how are we going to do that if I can't show decimals? Well, it's pretty simple. Take this, open for date, Wheel of 24. I've got here my Wheel of 24, and set it to, remember, we're at 10 cents. So naturally, I know it seems a little bit strange, but you just enter 10 as your increment. Now there's a new relationship being formed here, okay? Each row is not $24, but in this case, being set to 0.1, each row is 240, right, cents, or $2.40. Okay, so it's just being multiplied by 10, but on the wheel, but then really it's being divided by 10. So I hope that makes sense. It's a little bit tough. We're taking this, multiplying it by 10, so each increment is $10, but it's each degree of the wheel being 10. And therefore, the entire circle is 240. But we know that being set to 10 cents per degree, this is, oh, sorry, this is actually going to be $24. Okay, 10 cents per, oh, 24, no, $2.40, that's right. Okay, 10 cents per degree. So let's just take a look. Let's make sense of this. And it's a little bit difficult to speak about, okay? So here we have 10 cents per degree. We've got our 10 cents per degree. Let's start at $0, $0, 0 cents. Our first level here, 90 degrees, well, $9. It makes sense. It's a direct relationship. $9, 90 degrees. Well, on the wheel, $9 is here. We have to make this math. And instead of going by dividing by 10 like we did here, we're going to multiply by 10 because the increments are set to 10. It's just, we're relating it down one decimal. And it's sort of a difficult concept to wrap your head around, but it's like you're going outward. And then when you go inward when you go from $1 to $10 to $100, whatever the wheel setting might be, it's quite simple. You're going outward. But as you go inward, you're kind of doing the same thing. Instead of multiplying by 10, you're dividing by 10. But the wheel only works outward. So we need to keep it as if it was $1 or $10. But we're going to relate it to ourselves. Okay, and we're going to know where the decimal should be by the fact that in reality we're dividing by 10. So if the price is at 90 degrees, or let's just say we're looking for where 90 degrees is from 0, well, if I go up, right, I'm looking here, and just gotta line myself here. 90. That doesn't make sense, right? The price is at $9. So the price is $9, and it's automatically being multiplied by 10. So 9. And the price is down here. 270, still not working. So you've got to realize there's something about these wheels that when you start to deal with different ratios, you've got to work out the way that each setting sits. And there's no easy way for me to say divide out by this, multiply out by this. It's a really nice thing to be able to see the planets on the wheel because it tells you which row the price should be in relation to the real planets. So let's take a look here. Let's get a little more detailed here. As I break inwards, I want to see the real position here. So on the wheel of 24, I know that this is broken up differently. So I'm going to add those 10 cents. Really tight, right? It's all getting a little bit too much. So just like before, I want to break inwards and I want to see this on an hourly. I can't really see the 24-degree harmonics on a daily chart. Okay, it just doesn't make sense. It's for intraday trading, in my opinion. You can see the 360-degree, the actual positions of the planets and how they relate to the wheel of 24, because that's giving you other kinds of information. But you've really got to figure out where you are on the wheel. Therefore, if I zoom in, it's going to help a lot. So I'm going to bring up a cloned chart. And I'll zoom right in. Okay. This is going to help us determine our location and really figure out how to lay these lines in relation to 10 cents and find ourselves on the wheel. So if I get in here and I change it down to a 15-minute chart, well, there we go. Now we see a little bit more detail, and there's no planets in the area that we're sitting in. And we're seeing only 13 rows. Let's see 15 rows. Okay, those are those actual positions. And now we need our 24-degree harmonics. So let's pull those in. Add layer. Oops. Gonna bring them in from my preset imported layer. 24-degree harmonics. There we go. Click here. Get them all set to 10 cents. 10 cents. 0.1. There we go. Let them organize themselves. Drop the size of the symbol. There you go. A nice little, again, lots of support and resistance, same kind of processes that we were looking at before. But now we're looking for, let's try to find $21 on the wheel. We know $21 is 360 degrees. How many wheels have we gone up? Quite a few. Let's take a look. Let's just use the tool that we have. We can punch in revolutions here. I could try, have we gone 7? No, we haven't. You can see that 7 is down here. Have we gone 10? Okay, so that means that this line here starts the 10th row. Okay, this is a 10th row of our wheel. which means the price at $21 is way up on the 10th row. So let's find that number. If we know that there's 15 rows, I could also just punch in, let's see, only 10 rings on my wheel. And I know that being somewhere here at about $21, it's 360 degrees. Okay. And look at that, 2160. Okay. 2160. 2160. So you can see that the price is related here. Okay. It's multiplied, but the relationship is difficult to imagine when you're dealing with just popping in the price as we were before. So the planets, without having to do any calculation, just knowing where the planets are, knowing how to break up 360 degrees into 15, I've been able to locate the price on the wheel. I can re-add my 15 lines, my 15 rows, so that I can see where it relates to all the planets. I can pull it up to this recent time. And I am also going to, on the wheel, make sure my planetary factor, see that, is also set to 10. And now you're going to see all the planets end up where they're supposed to. And again, 2160, we know the price is up here, but what degree is that? Well, let's try 216. Well, that makes sense, right? 216 degrees on the wheel is 2160, but it's actually 360 degrees of the smaller wheel within. And now we can easily locate ourselves. This is something quite powerful because without the planets and without these stacks, you're not able to really position yourself on this wheel. And therefore, you aren't able to see this bigger geometry playing out that we were looking at on the daily, right? If I get rid of those, I want to know where those bigger planets are. I want to know where I am on the wheel compared to those planets. I want to see when the real price, or sorry, when the tighter price, when the 24-degree harmonics are also the real planet. And therefore I can see that confluence there. Why? Because those are the harder resistances. Those are the bigger resistances based on the movements of these bigger ratio movements, based on a wheel of 360 degrees, which is 15 times bigger than these movements. Okay. And so you've got to work the two. But you realize that all this time, for months even, until you get into these positions where all of these planets come together on the bigger wheel, well, you're defining all of that daily movement on an hourly, on a 4-minute even if you wanted to. Okay. So it's really about positioning yourself. And then once you know where you are on the wheel, no matter what the ratio is, 1.1, if it was 1 cent, you'd go by times 100. So all the planetary positions are times 100. And I would keep a, for a stock that's within $36, I might keep a 10 cents. I'll keep maybe a 5 cents, and I'll keep maybe, up to a $1 per day, right? Even seeing it on the much bigger time frames. So you've got to also relate time frame here to what you're looking at. You don't want to be trading these tiny little movements. You couldn't even see these tiny little movements on a daily chart. It's not going to give you that information. But, knowing that I didn't really do much more than copy over the information, set up those same planetary lines, we could look for those same exact things occurring. And I could join the two together, by the fact that I've got the wheel here on the side. I can watch not only for these events to occur on the screen here and cross, and for the price to be at the crossing that day, and watch for the price to move up and down with the sun, okay, or with Mercury, and watch for the relationships that it creates. Let's look at some other stuff here. these aren't going to define those bigger movements because you've got to look it towards those bigger planetary scales that we were looking at on the daily, right? That's why these big movements occurred. But look how nicely that moved basically, down to the 0 degree line here, down some resistance. Let's get our 15 rows back up. And I know it looks a little tight, but again, when you're dealing with this stuff, you might even look at, this is a 15-minute chart. I would say, let's look at a 4-minute chart even, because this is how tight you can get with the wheel of 24. And this is where the really powerful stuff comes in, because if you had your retrograde cycles chart and you had other kinds of charts, geometries, etc., you could get down to this point and really find some close entries and exits. Find when will the price reverse, the exact moment, down to even a 4-minute chart. And I can show you the process of that. It's not about the crossings at that point. These smaller movements day to day, intraday. It's not just about the crossings of the planets, okay? It's also about, I'll show you, in this case, the moon. The moon set again, 10 cents. And let's see it. Now, getting a lot more information here. Now, no, it looks a little bit crazy. It looks a little bit messy, let's say. But remember, this is a 4-minute chart. And we're watching our wheel, technically. Okay. And we're trying to see a relationship of planets, controlling the price, watching for planets to cross lines. And when we get this close, we're looking for the moon to do that. Instead of Mercury, like we were looking for before, we're looking for the moon to do those same exact things. Okay. And let's look here. When did we cross 0 degrees here? You can follow. This is the 24 degrees of the moon. It's the weekend. That's a gap on the weekend. That's that big bend that you're seeing, those big warps, jumps. That's because there's no time there. There's no market time. And then when we jump over to the next few days, you're getting, or not even a weekend, but even overnight. Okay, if there's no data overnight, you're going to get this jump. Okay, and so you can see the moon is here. It's crossing 90. It crosses 180 overnight. And then as it's getting up here, it crosses 0 degrees. The price is with it at 0 degrees. And it passes upwards, and it's still moving at the speed of the moon. And you could continue to follow this. You can have this here, and you can place the moon, and you can place the price together, and you could make sure they're together. So where is my price? $24, right? It's at 0 degrees. Well, we already know that we're multiplying by 10, so that's $240. Or sorry, 240 degrees of the wheel, which, sorry, great, no, I'm sorry, 24, right? $24, 24 degrees. You want to be 240, yeah. There we go, yeah, 240, okay? That makes sense, there we go. Okay, just above where we were before. And let's see, the moon is, let's see here, as we're crossing 0 degrees here, you can see the moon at that, it crossed over the night there, but right there, as the moon is crossing 0 degrees, see the moon together there. We could have timed it perfectly to the moon crossing 0 degrees for the price to spike upwards over 360 degrees, finds resistance at 90. But once the moon starts continuing on, what happens? The moon crosses 90 here. Well, the price is back up to this level. It's finding resistance up in the circle. Well, when's it moving up in the circle again? Once the moon crosses those planets, it's finding that same relationship to those levels with those planets as the moon crosses them. Where's the moon on this day here, right? Crossing 0 degrees. Where's the price? Jetting upwards, crossing levels. And so you realize that you've got to have an idea that these things are fluctuating, just like our retrograde cycles need to be sort of sussed out on multiple ratios. You might have a 0.1 or a 0.2 or a 0.5 or a 1 or a 2 or a $5 or a $100 wheel even, right? So it's just a matter of, where does the price sit? Which kind of movements would you like to define for yourself? And this is a really important thing. Let's take a look at this kind of thing here. I'm gonna zoom out a little bit. The relationships are not just arbitrary. They're not just, there's like a mechanics to it. It's almost like a clock that the price follows. And so if I were to then look towards each top and bottom, I might find that the moon is not only timing it right with the price crossing certain places, but the moon is also in relationship to different planets, not just crossing, but actually in relationship, like being an aspect, but on the wheel. So let's try that out. Let's do this. Each day, I would suggest to you to find where the price is, which in this case, on this day back when, it was at 19.2. So you know that's 192 degrees on the wheel. 192. There you go. Price is there. Okay, it's just a couple of rows down from where it was when we looked at it last. On this very day as well, at the crossing there, that's where the moon was. It was also at, let's see, moon is at 0 degrees. You can see it crossing up there, 0 degrees. Okay. Now let's take, since we know where the price is and we know where the moon is, let's also figure out where our sun is. Let's always align to the sun. So this is going to help us for intraday trading. It's almost like working with the tides. Okay. And so if I align my wheel of 24 to the sun, then I can see all the relationships to the sun and to all the other planets. And I want to do this one thing here. I can add some overlays. I want to see all of my 30-degree relationships, my 45-degree relationships, and even my 72-degree relationships. I want to see them like this, and I want to repeat them, and I want to make them a little thinner so they're a little less obvious. But it just gives me a very good ability to easily point out connections on the wheel to those different spots without having to be on the same level, right? Let's get those brighter colors. Let's get a bright green and a bright blue, bright yellow, okay? And what we're looking for here, again, we're gonna align to the sun, but I like to align on the row the price is on because I want to align to the sun, but I also want to know which harmonic that the price is sitting on so that we know the price is sitting on this row. Therefore, I'm going to align to the sun and I'm going to align to the price. And now we get this nice little tool that we can time events to the sun's position. So let's see here. Not only as we get here on this day on the chart here, we're crossing the 0 degree line. We know the price is there with it at 992 degrees. We also see that the sun pops and changes degrees there. Let's watch that again. Overnight, the sun jumped in degrees. So technically the price was there like that, perfectly 90 degrees on the day that it crossed to the sun. So not only did it pop over on the day that the moon crosses 0 degrees, and probably at the exact hour, it's just that we can't see that because that's overnight, but also the sun changes the degree. It crosses 90 degrees on that day. And therefore, you get this sort of massive spike. It's an energy kind of boost. And let's readjust our sun here. Now what I want to see is I want to see some smaller moves timed to the moon. I want to be able to see this up-down motion every day, defined by the motion of the moon and the sun. And I'm going to try to find that. So I'm going to find here, okay, the moon, the position right there. The moon is square to the sun. Do you see that? That's the sun. They're square. This is 90 degrees from it. That's one side of the square. So that's 90 degrees. It's really a good thing to see because often a run or a price movement will begin when the moon squares the sun, or it will end when the sun is squared to the moon. Okay, it's just a common thing. You're waiting for these moments to occur throughout the day. You're watching it, watching it, watching it, watching it, and then We see all that action as it crosses 0 degrees, the moon changes, and then we're looking for a squaring. We're looking for these smaller movements to be defined by the moon moving. And as I pull it upwards, let's see what happens when the moon becomes, making relationship to the sun again. Here we have the moon is now 60 degrees from the sun right here. And we get a sort of change. We get a boost. We get a topping out just beyond that point. I'm sure you see when at this point it's the end of the day again, and we get the moon is jumping. Okay. Pop. Okay. Now you can see the sun is way down here. We have to change all our relationships again. So I'm going to pull it over here. But let's see where the price has ventured off into. On this day, at this point, it's beyond $21.60. It's up here on $23. And you can see it's right up near Saturn and Uranus, those the yellow and the orange line. And so as I come around here, I'm going to want to look at my price in the right spot. So 21.60, I know it's at $23, right? From 21.60 is the 360 mark. It jumped over. And now we're looking for the price times 10 because it's set to 10 cents. And so I could even do 22.80, let's say. That's just below the price is finding resistance at the 180, or just above, let's say. Oops. Let's get that entered. 192. So let's enter it at 22.80, which is 228. There we go. Price just over 180. Okay. You can see that it's finding resistance at Saturn, which is just there. Okay. And Saturn is also 30 degrees from the sun with Uranus. It's making a bit of a wheel of 24 aspect, if you want to call it that. It's a special aspect. Basically, they're just together on the wheel. Okay. And it becomes a moment of change because the price can't really get through there very easily. But maybe once the moon becomes sort of fast enough and moves far enough, we can see the moon is in this time crossed 0 degrees, right? It's now up above here, just crossing 0 degrees again. Let's see. And there we have the moon is down here, okay? Just at 0 degrees. It's on the wheel. We're looking for the price to cross with the moon again. It's like amplifying us beyond each octave. All right. And these are harmonics too. These are harmonics of the bigger octave of 360 degrees, but these are harmonics. And so we're waiting for the moon to cross 0 degrees. It crosses there that day and we get up. And the moon touches Mercury. They're together on the wheel. You see that on this day. The price finds a top. Where does it find the top? At 24.4, so 244 degrees. 244 degrees. There's the price with the moon and Mercury on the wheel. We can even align it here. Again, to make sure that you can see the relationship. And we're looking for an end to sort of happen when the moon again makes that relationship to the sun. So where is it? If we're here up here at the sun, it's not only being related to Mercury on this line here, okay, but it is also, if you noticed, on this 30-degree harmonic, okay, of the sun. And how many is that? Let's see how many degrees on the wheel of 24 is the sun away from the moon. And that's 30, 60, right? 90, well, 120. So it's a triangle relationship, and you can see that by the fact that there's this triangle. And we're finding a major top on the 4-minute chart. So this is something that's going to last for not a very long time. It's a top that's now going to fall and find another relationship with the price again, with the moon And now when the moon crosses 0 degrees again, where is the price? Again, there. So this is the next time the moon has gone around. Let's just move it around. All the way around the circle, the moon crosses 0 degrees again. There's an overnight there, and the moon crosses 0 degrees again. You can see that the sun still hasn't moved. It's still aligned to the sun. And we could see that the price just ended up right back where it was. Found resistance up here at Mercury again, popped a little bit over, made it to about, say, 90 degrees, the geometric perfect 90 degrees. Then when did it break out? Well, it started to break out again as the moon crosses 90 degrees, as it starts to cross these different planets. And also, if you really take a look closely, or if you are following um, your planets versus your moon, you'd also see that Mercury and Venus cross there. So if I were to look at the wheel, I pull my wheel, I double click on the chart, I've got it here. I want to see, where is Venus and Mercury? Well, they're right together on the wheel. The price is right there, right together. When is it there? When the moon kind of crosses the two. And so as much as I'd like to tell you that it's like a set of rules that's easy to follow, it's really not. It's a bunch of rules, but truly it's about the fast planets interacting with the slower planets. So the vertical planets, the planets that move much more vertically in a diagonal, are moving a lot faster than the planets that are flat. And therefore, we're looking for relationships between the fast planets and the slow planets, and we're looking for those crossings to become significant. Whenever the moon crosses the 0 degree of our smaller ratio, this is our 10 cents per degree. So, we're looking for a small change, and we're looking for it to be directly related to the moon on a day-to-day movement. And I would also look for those bigger movements to be defined by relationships that you could make between the sun and the moon. But also, then realize that as you get outwards from here on an intraday from the intraday to the daily, you're also looking for those same kinds of relationships. But you're looking for them on the real planets, on the actual positions of the planets. And then further to this, there's also planetary aspects which you can integrate into the system. And planetary aspects are a whole other thing. They're a lot like these crossings that you see right here. These are just conjunctions that you're seeing. These are just the planets coming to the same exact degree on the wheel. On the wheel of 24, they just all come together onto the same spot. Let's go to this date here, where Mars and Jupiter are together on this chart. Well, here we have Mars and Jupiter together conjunct, and Mars and Jupiter are together on the wheel. There we go. They're right together, 1 degree. There we go. That's Mars and Jupiter together. Okay. And so we look for major change in trend that day because we know that the price within 360 degrees, it wants to be at this level. This price level has been called, and the planets want the price to be there, and therefore the price moves up there, finds resistance at those planets and falls back down. And how can we define those smaller movements? By the inner wheel, by that inner wheel of those 15 24-degree wheels. And that's what it looks like on that smaller scale. And I'm also showing you, notice I'm not just showing you the moon's regular, I'm looking at both of the reverse and the actual forward position, but maybe we should just see the forward position. We're looking for the moon to move up in longitude and cross these positions of the planets, and for the crossings to be significant enough that the actual price is going to be there. Not that, basically every crossing that the moon makes is significant. But you'll also find some sort of relationship if you know astrology, or if you have an understanding of astrology, the basics. You might find that some of those most stereotypical, or whatever you want to call them, the most classic things, like a relationship of the moon to Jupiter producing a bullish movement, and a combination of the moon and Saturn where we might find resistance. That kind of thing. The moon crossing Pluto being a bearish circumstance, whereas maybe something crossing the moon crossing Venus or Jupiter or Mars, a much more bullish experience. Well, those things will work, but they don't work every time because it has more to do with the positions, right? It has more to do with their price position. So the position of the market coming in, and where is the price target? Well, how do you figure it out? Well, that day, the moon is crossing Mars. That red line that you see there. I can pull that up. I can show that on my wheel if it helps me see the crossings, or I could just use the chart. If you don't like the wheel, you could just use the chart knowing that the wheel is on the chart. It's no different. You can use them interchangeably. You don't need to use the wheel. The wheel is just, it's an arbitrary, sorry. It depends on how you want to use it. If you like it, if you see it better on the wheel, use the wheel. If you see it better on the screen, use it on the screen. Sorry, I just have to cough a little bit. Reaching 3 hours here. So we are approaching what I would call my scheduled time, but we'll definitely move into some questions and stuff like that soon. But I just wanted to reiterate the idea that the Wheel of 24 is a way to use the planets, the one planetary ratio of, in this case, because this is within $36, we were using 10 cents. So even on our daily chart, we're using 10 cents per degree for our ratio of our planets. And you've got to realize that if we then break that down into 15 segments, this is now as if we were dealing with a factor that is not 10 cents, but it's as if the real planets were set to, that ratio of 0.15. Okay. And it would be like, in a sense, it's almost like setting these lines to 0.015. Okay. And I don't want to do that because it's going to make all the lines really crazy there and tight. But it's literally like taking our lines and shrinking them down to fit on a 24-degree chart like this. It's an equivalent ratio. And to see those multiples of planets broken down, you're getting oh, there you go. I did it by accident. Anyway, you're getting the movement of each planet and the relationships without having to know about planetary aspects, without having to know about even astrology, just knowing that this is a mathematical wheel of price and time. The planets are positions, but they're also just moving on the screen as a line, and we're watching for the lines to cross, and we're looking for those prices to become important. And why I think, obviously, why I had that other line there, because the downtrend information is going to be defined by our other moon line, the moon line that moves in reverse, that exact opposite line. So if I take my moon and I put it to reverse, I set it to both. There's my moon crossing downwards through planets and making up, when the price should be at a certain place. I mean, it's maybe not working as tightly right now, but also we are finding that there's sort of a midpoint that's being found, and realize that just like any other planet, if this is the moon going around each wheel of 24, in a sense, each 360 degrees that's being related to the 24-degree segments of the bigger circle, okay, we're looking for not just relationships to the moon directly. And it gets a little bit sticky that way, because just like we were looking for the moon to make a relationship to the sun as a square or a trine or a conjunction like it's doing right here, we're also looking for it to make those kinds of connections to other planets, that kind of thing, or also the price. So I can maybe visualize harmonics of the moon on a smaller scale. And I might only want to work with a couple planets if I start doing this. I don't want to necessarily see all of this stuff, right? So I might want to knock away some of this information, only look at a couple planets. Or maybe I need to go in closer and see a smaller time scale. Or maybe there's a different ratio to work with. It's sort of a bit of playing around. But again, I wouldn't venture too far. Stick with your standard ratios: $1 per day, 1 cent per day, 10 cents per day. It's not so that way you're always starting somewhere. Okay. And I can also just, just to prove that point, I can take and show more harmonics of the moon. I can show not just the 24-degree harmonics, but if I take 24 degrees and I split it up, if I know that 24 is now 360 degrees, well, I want to see the 90-degree harmonics. Well, I'm going to take my 24 degrees and I'm going to split them up into 4. So I'm going to divide 24 by 4. So I'm going to show every 6 degrees of the moon. I'm going to show the 6-degree harmonic of the moon. It's getting super tight. You can imagine this is sort of nuts, but for intraday trading, this is the way you do it. You get really good support and resistance. You could be definitely trading with leverage because you've got so many places to place stops and you're looking for many different relationships here. So let's just zoom out a little bit here. You can see how the price is sitting within these channels of the moon, of the 6 degrees of the moon. Let's see both. You're seeing those downward channels as well. And that tells you that not only is the 24 line or the actual position inside of the 24 degrees, which is now 360 degrees, right? Those smaller internal cycles, but also the harmonics of the moon within that 360 degrees are very good channel information for us. And maybe I can make them different here. I'll make the 24 line, make that a little thicker. So now you know that's the position of the moon itself. And let's make this a little simpler by just showing the forward lines. And let's get then also our 6 degrees. Oh, okay, so that's stippled. That's a little thicker. That's our 24 line. And then the actual position would be thick, a pure white line. But we're nowhere near that right now. And what am I seeing? I'm seeing the relationship here. Look at this crossing. The 6th degree of the moon crossing with Jupiter. So it's like another folded geometry on here. As I'm getting in and getting closer, I could see more and more relationships to the moon and different harmonics of the moon. And so if you know anything about aspects, well, if there was a square aspect to the moon on any of these days, I might want to see the 6 degrees of the moon because that's the square, that's my 360 degrees being broken into 4. Okay. So you have to sort of work all these things together a little bit, but I think already you're seeing immediately, just looking at this, I know it's a lot of lines, but you are looking for it to stay within the moon channels and relate them to the position of the moon on the wheel. So in a way, why don't we let's just knock out all the rest of the planets just for now. I'm not recommending this because you do want to see those planets. You do want to know when they're crossing. But just the moon, just the 6 degree harmonics, knowing that it's following the thicker ones and it's settling somewhere within the smaller harmonics, usually within one of the major 24 line. And why is it jumping and jetting away from the moon's harmonics at those points? Because there's crossing those other planets, and you know that already. It's really powerful, like to know that you can just pull out the moon, set it to something arbitrary in a sense. It's just set to 10 cents per degree. It's a very simplistic relationship. And then we're showing all these small, tight harmonics, but they're an appropriate an appropriate time frame. And I'm telling you, you do this on anything, this is going to define every single little movement of the market. This is the effect of the planets every day, just like you're seeing the effect of a planetary event on a huge scale with the retrograde stuff. This is the effect of a planetary cycle on its tiny scale, where the tiniest fractions of the moon is being measured out. And you can see that the crossings are important. When it crosses 0 degrees, that's when you're going to watch for the price to cross 0 degrees of the wheel. when the moon crosses 0 degrees, that's important, but also the other planets. Watch for the price to be with the planets as they cross 0 degrees. I could not go through enough examples of this with you. It's impossible. It's much more about beginning somewhere simple and taking it somewhere complex for yourself to the point where you would find the information that you need to trade. But look how beautiful that is. I mean, that is just an up day, a down day, an up day, right? All the definitions of the the sixth harmonic it's just defining everything there. And those up and downs, well, how do I know how to deal with those? Well, I could just throw down those other planetary lines. So I think that you could be probably pretty overloaded with the amount of information I've just thrown at you. I'd love it if you take especially this Wheel of 24 part and really try to dissect the understanding that you're seeing the wheel within the wheel. You're seeing the 24-degree circles inside of the 360-degree circles, and you know that the difference is that those bigger cycles, those bigger planetary lines that are set to the 10 cents, but they're actual positions, those are going to define the larger market structure. Just like we saw, we're going to use our planetary retrograde cycles to call prices into the future, all kinds of stuff with this kind of chart. And we're looking for this kind of real support and resistance that you're sort of seeing happen. But also you realize that the movements in between are fully defined by the smaller harmonics. You could look at this on a 1 hour chart without the moon. I would remove the moon and I would look at it on a 1 hour and I would just see the planets at that smaller level first. I would look at, the relationship of the price to the actual set 360 degrees. Again, it's only set to that arbitrary 10 cents per unit. And then I can start adding my planets or my moon. But the moon, you don't want the moon on that high time frame. You want, say, the sun, and you want Jupiter. So let's just see Jupiter. That's Jupiter there. Oops. The blue line is Jupiter. And let's see the sun. So we know that that's a classic bullish pairing. Just want the sun here. I thought I knew where it was, sorry. Okay, well, let's just get it out there. Let's make sure. Planetary lines, let's just place this to the sun. There we go. That's our sun, and that's Jupiter. So let's zoom in a little bit. This is our hourly chart. We're not looking at a 4 hour. We're not looking at the moon. We're looking at the sun crossing 0 degrees, crossing Jupiter, calling the price to that level. Watching for the price to break 360 degrees when the sun does, or when Mercury does, right? That was another one to look at. It's a good one, is Mercury. So let's also just add, to add it Mercury, I just add the conjunction line and Mercury. I add my 24-degree harmonic, right? So there's all my Mercury lines. Let's get that one stippled. We want to see those 24-degree harmonics as a little bit different. So there's my fainter purple lines. I think you're seeing that same kind of thing that we were seeing with the moon, where the price travels not just around the circle, but literally on the planetary line and around it, and those smaller up and down motions being defined by the relationship the planets are making along the way. And you might want to try a bigger scale. If just looking at this, I can try 0.2. I don't need to work with the geometry of the circle necessarily. If I understand the circle and I understand what I'm looking for from the circle on the planetary lines, I can know that I can just work with 0.2 easily. I can throw my stuff to 0.2 and I can get those other targets. And I'm going to tell you that as the market fluctuates, you might want to have your eye on 2 different time frames and 2 different ratios. I would watch the 60-minute and I would throw the planets down and I would watch them at, let's say, $1, or sorry, the one by one, which before you noticed I had it set to 10 cents per day or per degree. And in this case, I'm going to watch the hourly. Maybe I'm going to watch the hourly at the 20 cents, and maybe I'll watch a lower time frame at the 10 cents instead. So I'll watch a 15-minute on the 10 cent, and I'll watch an hourly on the 20 cents. And then, you want to see different ratios, and you want to see this combination of the single ratio playing out on multiple levels. Often, you're going to notice that the ratio that works best on this larger structure is going to be best to then break down from. So if this price is, it's venturing up towards $100, but it never really breaks into anything that we would want to relate to 360 degrees to $360. So 10 cents per degree is the right setting for this one to begin with. And we know that we can get right in there, but maybe we're finding that on a smaller scale, 10 cents per degree for the smaller harmonics is a little too tight. We can open up a new chart and we can set that one to the $20, or sorry, the 20 cent in this case, but it's just the next level up. Okay. Factoring is something that is difficult, but what I'm trying to show you is that it's just a matter of using multiples and preparing for multiple possibilities. And further to this, there's a study of volume that you can use to really kind of see that flow changing. And I would go back to that explanation I gave you before. So I think I'm going to start wrapping it up. It's been really long. We've lost a couple people. Remember, it's all recorded, so don't worry about that. And I do want to hear some questions from you if you got them. I know it's a lot, but I'd like you to try to stick to the information we had today. Nobody really had any questions about retrograde cycles, but let me know if you have. I know the Wheel 24 is more complex. I know that we're watching for more things to happen. I haven't really showed you everything possible with this, but I've given you a really good understanding of how. Rewatch this, because if you really could understand how the wheel is just being drawn onto the chart and the planets are being drawn basically in a very simplistic relationship, in this case at 10 cents per day or per degree, it's never something too complex. It's a very simplistic system. The geometries play out because they work, not because of the way we have the settings. So knowing that the market moves at, say, a ratio between 10 cents and $1 per day on a daily chart and per degree with the planetary lines, you know that you're going to in some way move at all of those ratios, and you're going to have to figure out a way to deal with that. I've got all kinds of different ways, but ratio is not the most important thing because you just begin with what is standard. He's given you those. Gann has given you those. We haven't talked about Gann at all today, but why did Gann give you these ideas of working with time and price in this manner of squaring $1 per day? I know it seems like that's his simplest example, but he used it for a reason. It's a place to begin. Okay. And from that, we can try all kinds of different ratios if we'd like. But I'm telling you, it's best to just prepare for multiple. $1, $2, $5. Or if it moves slower than that, or in the smaller increments, maybe 10 cents, 20 cents, 50 cents, maybe $1 at most. And then if it was up in the thousands of dollars, I might want to see my $20 wheel, my $10 wheel, my $20 wheel, and my $50 wheel, even my $100 wheel. And I will have multiple wheels for an instrument. It only makes sense. And as the market fluctuates and grows and moves faster, the defining moments will occur on the ratio that makes most sense for the movement that's occurring. You're going to have to play around with that, okay? I know it seems like I'm leaving you there, but it really is a beginning of something that if you just use these settings that I've given you, pump it up by 10 when it jumps up to another level of over $360 or about $360, let's go up to $1 per degree. Once we jump over $1,000 or even $3,600, let's jump up to the $10 per degree. Let's not think of it too much more complexly than that for now, because it's a good place to begin. And truly, it's also where most people end up. You're looking for things to work out on the $1 per degree or the $2 or that arbitrary perfect geometric target. But along the way, you're giving yourself a trading system which gives you a little bit of forgiveness. You can have stops that, if you're wrong and it doesn't work out to a perfect crossing at the perfect time, you're in and out of the market in a safe way. And so a trading system and technical indicators like trailing stops and things like that, all very important. I like to look at moving averages, but I like to look at on a, say, a 60-minute chart. I'd like to see the moving average of a higher time frame. So I would like to see the moving average of, let's say, just like a 20-day moving average. Whoops, that's not the one to use. I like to see, it's simplistic, but I like to see a moving average of, say, the daily. I can see higher time frame moving averages. And let's set that up so it's yellow, bright yellow and dotted and thick. So that's my daily, that's my weekly 5-bar moving average set on my 60-minute chart. And it really gives you some nice information. I think it's better than using the moving average that sits on the price, or sorry, on the time frame that you're working with. I think that you see a cycle occurring within time frames, and therefore, just like we were seeing midpoints of retrograde cycles, or midpoints, maybe if you study aspects, midpoints of aspects are the most important point. Well, the midpoints of regular time frames of the day and the splitting up of time is really important too, and see where the day is beginning, where are you finding your low, where are you finding your secondary low of the day. Watch that shift over time. Okay, this is a week, okay, but watch the daily if you want. Got my daily there. Okay. So I would never abandon simplistic technical analysis, but I would use it in conjunction with all of these targets that I get from my Wheel of 24 and all kinds of those other targets that I got from my retrograde cycles. And I'm telling you that basically you've got your Wheel of 24 and you've got your retrograde cycles. You could technically define your entire stock with these movements, with these settings. You don't need to really venture into too many different techniques. That's why I like these two techniques. I focus on them. I start my year with my retrograde cycle, and then I follow day to day. I might follow a couple ratios. It never gets too difficult. I'm never changing so many settings. I'm never laying down a million tools. It looks like I've done that today. It looks like I'm fluctuating and laying down so many tools constantly. I'm not. I'm just doing this not so often. I'm just following along with the price on this chart and watching it on the wheel. And at most, I'm updating the price on the wheel, making sure I know where the price is on the wheel. That's the most important thing. Okay. So thank you, guys. Thank you, guys. Thank you for the comments. I know you probably need to digest this, but if anybody has any questions, let me know. This is definitely music and color theory. There's no question. If you were to adjust all of these lines, and you could also probably process planetary cycles as sound, even, that's the music of the spheres. The way that I showed you those planetary movements as almost like something like a sound wave, definitely. There is this fractal nature to the market, and it's within the planetary relationships between multiple harmonics and also multiple ratios. And it's fluctuating with the market. And it's easy enough to sort of just take a general measurement at first, and then just be prepared for multiple ratios playing out. Very powerful. I love this tool. I don't know how, there's a few different programs out there, but Optima, I don't know. There's no way to do this so easily. Maybe Timing Solutions or something has something like this, but the graphic nature, I've never really been able to display this information to people so easily before Optima. So you understand why I'm focused on it. Thank you, Ali. Thank you, everybody. So the Gann wheels, they all kind of work similar. If you know the square of 9 or the hexagon, you can do these same things. You draw the price equivalent degrees of the wheels onto the charts, and you get them drawn on there, and you see the different geometries. Why would you use the square of 9 versus the wheel of 24? Well, the square of 9 is something that counts numbers differently. Each row of the square of 9 is increasing in the amount of numbers. It's growing logarithmically in size to time, the time to price. Whereas there's a one-to-one relationship with the wheel as we go around each circle here. So the square of 9 spirals out, whereas these numbers just count upwards and upwards. So you're using them for different circumstances. I would usually use the square of 9. I mean, you could definitely use the square of 9 for intraday, but I prefer the wheel of 24 for intraday. And then you could also use the square of 9 with the planets. And I would prefer to use that for my daily charts, bigger geometries. Okay, it's like I'm splitting the wheel up into 24 in this case. And then in some sense, it's like splitting the wheel up into 9 is less harmonics. But it's not really that relationship, but you could kind of look at it that way. You're calling more moves with 24 harmonics than you are with something that can be related to 9. Thank you, Jessica. Thank you, guys. I know it's a lot to digest, and it was very long, and there was barely a break. So I know that maybe the Q&A is something that, I would love to have a great Q&A one day in one of these sessions. I think that you understand why I've isolated it into a more, private environment for this. It's more complex. The stuff I was showing you today is much more complex. Day to day, you're looking at this chart in detail. You're getting close inwards. Seeing those jagged lines it's sort of distracting. People that trade crypto, you're going to be happy to know that when you're trading crypto, all these lines are nice and smooth. They're not all jagged because there's no gaps in time. A market that trades 24/7 is a lot more pleasant to look at with the planets, I'll tell you that much. It looks a lot more like this day to day on the smaller harmonics. And you can use a setting here. Let's just zoom in here just for a second. There's a setting in here called calendar day setting. And you're going to see it now. It's going to give me the overnight gaps as 0 movement. And so now the planetary lines are a little smoother. It's the actual position of the planet being a little more defined. It's giving us that overnight information about the planet. Okay. But you can see that it gets a little bit awkward in its own right. Okay. I prefer to see it without the gaps. I've become accustomed to it. And if I need to see more, I just get down in time. I drop down to a lower time frame and I look at it. And I'm telling you, watch for the moon to make those intersections at 0 degrees. Watch, and then also watch for Mercury, watch for the sun, watch for Venus. And when those longer term cycles, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, when they cross these lines, it's a lot more rare, and therefore it's a lot more significant. Just like I was saying with the planetary cycles of retrograde, the ones that happen less often, in a sense, are more important. It's an overall geometry that's somewhat longer winded and more overarching. It overpowers the lower geometries. Okay. Hopefully this was interesting, helpful, felt like you got your money's worth. Remember, I'm around for every question that you might have afterwards. Email me, please. I'm going to email you the video or a link to the video to download. If you'd like these charts, I can give you these charts. I'll share any charts I showed you with you in this class if you do run Optima. Remember, there's that amazing sale this weekend for Optima. It's unprecedented. I would have loved to have that when I bought Optima. Not that it matters because, well, you know that if you're doing this stuff and you're trading it and you're making money, do it. That's why these tools are expensive, but it's also because they take a lot to program, to make them precise, to make them exact. You can imagine the amount of thought that goes into programming this stuff. Okay, guys, so that's basically 3.5 hours together that we've spent. It's a nice video to rewatch, I think, with me just talking without the interruptions of others, but also, I wish, it would be nice to have a Q&A, but if there is no questions, I understand. It's overwhelming. I understand that. Throw these kinds of lines down. Hopefully, if you don't use Optima or something like this, give it a try. But also, hopefully, maybe you could try to understand how to do these things on a regular chart. You don't necessarily need Optima. You might not be able to draw the planetary lines with such detail, but you can certainly draw your price degree intervals. And you can certainly watch some form of the Wheel of 24, okay? You could draw it on paper if you wanted to, or you could probably find a template out there, a free template of the actual geometries of the Wheel of 24 and plot these things on manually. It's not so impossible, especially longer term, especially on this bigger chart, right? On this more zoomed out chart with the bigger harmonics. Okay, guys. So a little recap. We start our year with retrograde planets, and then we move on to the Wheel of 24. Not that tough, right? I know, lots to digest, especially if I had, put that warning out there in a sense. This was more advanced, but I think that it all comes down to the same concepts: planetary movement, how much time has passed. In this case, we're counting planetary degrees. How much time has passed by how many degrees has the planet moved? And that's going to tell us some important cycle information: when we're going to jump octaves, when we're going to jump 360 degrees into a new level of 360 degrees. All of this defined by the movements of the planets over this, especially the moon on the smaller time frame. Whoa, that's no good. Look at that moon on that smaller time frame. Just to, it's a lot. There we go. Whew, there we go. Took a lot for the computer to draw that out. But, those channels are just so powerful all the time. Every day, the moon defines the price movement. I can tell you where the price is going to be every day within a range because I know where the moon is. Obviously here, we're seeing that. Okay. And people ask me how you trade the moon. This is one way. It's a great way. We have other ways. You use the natal transits. But this is a great way to time things. You can really look for the moon on the wheel versus the chart and see it crossing on the wheel. See them all happen at the same time, right? Moon crossing 180 degrees there. There's a problem with these stocks because that overnight a lot happens, and that's why you get a lot of gapping. The moon moves, right? The moon was following, the price was following this moon line here. Well, that moon line, by the time the next day comes around, is up here. Okay, where does it find its new position? The 6 degree harmonics. It's moving harmonic to harmonic. Okay, and so you're seeing that it's the moon going around the circle and interacting with all the planets, and the price being pulled to that position. So powerful. I would try to give an example last week where I was just calling, each movement of the price. Oh, well, this crosses at this time, so that's where the price should be, or at least around that time. And that's how you time the market that way. You could find out excellent times each day, a week ahead, a month ahead if you want, and just mark them down on your calendar. Or just plot those simple spots. When does, on here, my planetary angle tool, planetary angles tool. I want to see every time Mercury crosses 24 degrees, and I want to see it repeat every time. Okay, that's too many because Mercury is too fast for the daily. Let's see every time Mars crosses. Let's make it red line. Now you can see some nice changes. And also, we could look on this day. We know, oh, Mars is crossing the 0 degrees of the 24 wheel that day. I could look at the price that day, and I can make sure that I know where it is on the wheel, and I can relate it to Mars. it's so you've got a map also of the wheel in these kinds of tools. Okay. Okay, guys. Well, thank you very much for coming to this, and thanks for having it. This is my first paid webinar. I've done webinars, or sorry, seminars in person, and it's preferred, I suppose, because I get to see all your faces and we get to interact in that way. But I think this is also nice for everybody to sit in their pajamas and take it in and not have to make such a production of it. You know, you're here with me now, and also I'm accessible by email. But remember, you're going to be able to watch this over and over again. The information is there for you to dig into, look into the different things that I talk about and mention that I might not have gotten into. So I don't want to just leave you, but you know, if we're all done, we're all done. If anybody has any questions, feel free to ask. I'll leave the room here open. Thank you all for coming and doing this. I'm going to do this again. I'm going to probably going to maybe do a series. I've got a bunch of different seminars to go through. I've got 50 hours of materials. I'm going to have a beginner's free seminar soon, and that'll be more basic. But I'm definitely going to do another advanced one at the end of the semester, summer semester, at the end of the month. I'm going to do a maybe a planetary aspects and natal transits. So some of you might have already done that with me, but I'm going to do one of those for people who have never done that in detail. So it'll be a little cheaper than my regular private one-on-one, but you know, it's nice to do this in this group setting. And again, if you do have questions, let me know. I'll share people's questions anonymously to everybody. If you have a question that I think might make sense to everybody, send me it by email, and I'll remove all your identities and forward it off to everybody so that everybody sees the kinds of questions that people might have had. It might spur a question in you as well. Okay. Thank you, guys. So if there's nothing else, I'm just going to log out, and I will get to rendering the video and uploading it, and you will get an email from me probably sometime tomorrow. It's a little late here now, approaching 10 p.m. I'm going to take the dog for a walk. And again, anything else, give me a call or give me a DM on Twitter or email me anytime. Thank you, Amber. Thank you, guys. Thank you, guys. Have a great Gand's birthday weekend. It's always a significant one on the markets. And yeah, should be a big week in the next coming weeks. I know I didn't, really look into the future too much. I don't really love to do that. I don't mind talking to people about price, but it's not about that at this point. If you can predict where the price was going in the past, you will be able to predict where it's going in the future. You just need to realize the market fluctuates. You might have to adjust your settings. So it's not that a cycle didn't work this time or it worked differently than the last time. It's that the market has changed and therefore the settings need to be adjusted. Maybe the market's moving slower than it has in a long time, or it was moving a lot faster, and therefore we need to expand our settings. Keep going, and I keep going. I can never stop. So thanks, guys. Have a great weekend, everybody. I'll let you go, and I'm going to end it now, and I'll get back to you by email. Thanks a lot, everybody.